Chapter 1. Hey, Eric, steaks for table 9. Oh, okay, Eric answered and clumsily brought 2 steaks to a couple by the window. After that, he returned to his original position and continued to stare blankly at the counter. It was July 13, 1988, the 3rd day of his rebirth. The location was an Italian restaurant in North Hollywood, Los Angeles. Eric turned his head and looked at the faint figure reflected in the glass window not far away. He was about 1.8 meters tall, with a sharp face, a high-nose bridge, and short blonde hair. This was his current self. A few days ago, Eric was still an advertising director in Shanghai, across the Pacific Ocean in 2014. At the age of 24, he graduated from a famous film and television academy in the country. He was determined to become a famous director internationally. After 10 years of hard work, he finally understood that reality was too cruel. With his solid professional foundation, he still became a famous advertising director in Shanghai. In any case, he was still famous, wasn't he? He got married at the age of 35. A year later, his son was born. He finally settled down and changed his dreams into money for milk powder. A few years later, at a class reunion, he was drunk by a group of classmates who he hadn't seen for a long time. Then, he fell asleep in the memories of the past. Just like the beginning of all horror stories, when he woke up, everything was different. He found that he had returned to 25 years ago and became a high school student named Eric Williams. He had just graduated from high school this year, and, "Eric, are you okay?" A chubby hand rested on Eric's shoulder and patted him gently. Eric turned around and saw the restaurant owner, Jeff Jones. "I'm sorry, Jeff. I was distracted again." "It's okay," Jeff rubbed his hands, as if he was thinking about how to phrase it. He continued, "I'm very sorry about what happened to Ralph, but life has to go on, right? Cheer up, Eric." Ralph Williams, Eric's father, was an excellent Italian chef who had worked in this restaurant for many years. Although his cooking skills were excellent, Ralph had a very bad habit: drinking too much. According to the memories left behind by the original owner of this body, Ralph's hobby might have something to do with Eric's mother, whom he had never met. In the words of the later generations, he was also a man with a story. The matter was simple. A month ago, Ralph died of acute alcohol poisoning due to excessive drinking. "Thank you, Jeff. If it wasn't for your help, I really don't know what to do," Eric said. After Ralph died, Eric's life fell into chaos. Originally, Eric had applied to the University of California. However, Ralph's death had caused Eric's hopes of going to university to dwindle. Even if it was a public university, it would still cost about $20,000 a year, not including other expenses. As Ralph's boss and friend, after Jeff and Eric had a discussion, Eric began to work as a waiter in the restaurant. After all, as Jeff said, life had to go on. "Ralph has worked here for so many years. This is what I should do. But I can only do this much. The rest will depend on your own efforts." Eric gratefully nodded. Seeing Jeff turn around and leave, he thought about his words and fell into deep thought. In the unseen world, since some unscrupulous god sent him to Hollywood more than 20 years ago, if he continued to be an unknown restaurant waiter, that god would definitely be angered to death. 3 days ago, after understanding his situation, Eric was excited, but after the excitement, he was at a loss. In his previous life, as a top student in the Film and Television Academy, he didn't realize his dreams and finally bowed his head to reality. What's more, now he had neither a diploma nor a background. Even if he went to a movie company to apply for the lowest position, he might not succeed. After a busy day, Eric drove out of the Italian restaurant. The car was a Ford left behind by Eric's cheap father. After Ralph's death, Eric wanted to sell the car to support his family, but after accepting the waiter job, he kept it. After all, the United States was a country on wheels. Without a car, many things were inconvenient. When he passed by a movie theater, Eric saw the poster of First Blood 3 in front of the theater. Against the backdrop of snowy mountains and helicopters, Stallone, who was in his prime, wore a tank top, showing off his muscles that could make female fans scream. Eric parked the car in a parking lot not far away. After asking around, he found out that a show was about to start. Eric bought a ticket and walked into the theater. Because it wasn't prime time, there were only about 30 to 40 people in the 200-seat theater. Eric found his seat and sat down. Soon, the theater fell into darkness. After the introduction, the movie officially began. Colonel Tuvan invited Rambo, who was living in seclusion in Thailand, to go to Afghanistan for a mission, but Rambo rejected him. After Colonel Tuvan was captured, Rambo armed himself again to save his good friend. In his previous life, Eric had seen all of Stallone's movies, and most of them more than once. The reason why he bought a ticket was that Eric remembered Stallone's experience, and at the same time, he remembered his past. In those 10 years, whenever he wanted to give up, he would use some inspirational stories to motivate himself, including Stallone's legendary acting career. The movie continued. Eric collected his thoughts and focused on enjoying the movie. Gradually, Eric, who was originally relaxed and leaning against the back of the chair, straightened up his back. Because he had seen this movie before, whenever the plot progressed, Eric would subconsciously think about what would happen next. Then, he magically found that as he thought, the next scene of the movie would appear clearly in his mind. In other words, he remembered every scene, every line, and even every piece of the soundtrack. Gradually, Eric became excited. He closed his eyes and randomly picked Cameron's Titanic to recall. The result was the same. He could remember every minute and every second of the movie. He picked a few more movies that he had seen before, and it was the same. Eric tried to recall some of the movies that he had only heard of but had never seen before. A miracle did not happen. It seemed that he could only remember the movies that he had seen before, but that was enough. When he had just been reborn, Eric had thought about taking over some of the movies from his previous life. However, he had been a professional director in his previous life. Of course, he knew how difficult it was to do this. The most he could do was to write some similar scripts. But now, after discovering that his mind was clearly filled with all the memories from his previous life, Eric knew what it meant. As long as he had the right conditions, he could almost perfectly replicate the classic movies that he had seen in his previous life. Because of his excitement, Eric's cheeks were hot in the dark, and his fingers were slightly numb. In the end, Eric could not help but slap the armrest of the chair. He blurted out, F***CK. The pain in his palm pulled Eric back to reality. Seeing the dissatisfied looks from the audience, Eric smiled embarrassedly. 100 minutes of the movie passed quickly. Lon Bo successfully rescued his good friend. He waved his sleeves again, hiding his credit and fame. However, Eric, who was sitting in the dark, obviously did not notice this. Instead, his mind was racing as he thought about many things. In his previous life, he did not have such a good memory. Like a normal person, he had to read an article many times before he could memorize it, and he had to listen to a song many times before he could sing it. Obviously, this was a huge fortune given to him by some unscrupulous, cute god. Carrying the ambition of reaching the peak of his life, Eric walked out of the theater and hurriedly drove home. He knew that with such a huge amount of resources in his mind, if he failed like he had in his previous life, he might as well choke himself to death with a basin of tap water. Chapter 2. Eric gently put the heavy second-hand typewriter on the desk and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He missed the thin and light laptop from his previous life. It was the second day after he found his memory. After a day of thinking, Eric had a preliminary plan for his future. Therefore, he specifically asked for a day off from Jeff. After shopping for half a day, he bought the second-hand typewriter. This was essential to the realization of his plan. After dealing with Ralph's funeral, Eric only had a few $100s left in cash. In Western countries with good welfare systems, people never had the habit of saving money. After his rebirth, Eric was glad that the mortgage on his house was paid off. Otherwise, because he couldn't pay the mortgage, if the house was repossessed, he might have to sleep on the streets. In this way, the money to buy the typewriter was an advance of 1 month's salary from Eric to Jeff. To realize his dream, he must first enter the Hollywood circle. Directly becoming a director was out of the question. Being an actor was also not a suitable path for him. After thinking about it, the most suitable path for him was to be a screenwriter. Although people always said that the status of screenwriters in Hollywood was low, in fact, it was not because the top screenwriters all changed careers to directors and producers. This was no different from the Hong Kong movies that were in full swing on the other side of the ocean. Putting a piece of paper into the typewriter, Eric raised his hand and typed a line of letters on the keyboard. Jurassic Park. Yes, it was the most profitable movie series in the 90s. Eric still remembered his previous life. He bought the Jurassic Park DVD from a vendor selling pirated DVDs and watched it with a group of friends. When the lifelike dinosaurs appeared on the TV screen, the feeling could only be described with one sentence. My friends and I were stunned. In his memory, the novel Jurassic Park was published in 1990. The novel was only about 100,000 words, so Michael Clayton must not have started writing it yet. Eric took it for himself with a clear conscience. If he did not take it, he would be punished. As for Michael Clayton, a character with such a fantastic life experience, there was no Jurassic Park or Cretaceous Park. Eric's mouth slightly curved up. He recalled the past while typing on the keyboard. He was not writing the script for Jurassic Park, but the novel. In his previous life, after watching the movie, he was curious and seriously read the Jurassic Park novel. Now, with the memory of a high school student with good grades, it was more than enough to translate the Chinese version into English. The reason why he did not directly write the script was that if he directly wrote the script and sent it to the movie company, it would most likely be thrown into the garbage bin like waste paper. The Hollywood movie companies received scripts every day could basically be counted by the weight. On the other hand, Eric wanted to firmly control the film rights of this series in his own hands. Even if he wrote the script now, it would be picked up by a discerning film company and made into a movie. In the end, those film companies would be the ones to reap the most benefits. As for Eric, in addition to the tens of thousands of dollars for the script, he would receive an additional bonus at most. Eric would definitely not do something like this that would cause him to lose money. Once the novel was published, Eric would be able to firmly control the film and television rights in his hands. He would then wait for the right time to sell it and maximize the benefits he could obtain. Time always flies when immersed in work. When the sky was completely dark and Eric could no longer see the letters on the keyboard, he realized that he had unknowingly written for 4 to 5 hours. His stomach also began to growl. Standing up, Eric looked at the thick stack of manuscripts on the desk and stretched with satisfaction. At this speed, he would be able to finish the manuscript in about a week. After all, he still had to continue working at Jeff's restaurant, otherwise he would starve. Eric went into the kitchen and made himself a simple dinner. Rice and scrambled eggs with tomatoes, a typical Chinese home-cooked meal. As for the remaining bread, cheese, peanut butter and the like in the fridge, Eric usually ate them as snacks these days. Although he inherited the memory of the original guy, the eating habits of the East were deeply ingrained in his bones. After eating a simple dinner, Eric went to the balcony on the second floor and leaned against the railing to look at the surrounding night view. The apartment he lived in had a small yard of less than 200 square meters. It was a 2-story house with some unknown plants in the yard. There was no mistress. His father, Ralph, was also a person who did not care about trifles, so the father and son's life had always been rough. In his memory, the father and son moved from London, England, to Los Angeles when they were about 7 or 8 years old. Eric did not remember why Ralph did this. He was too young at the time, and according to the clues in his memory, Eric could not figure it out, so he was too lazy to think about it. After moving to Los Angeles, Ralph dragged little Eric around for only 2 days. Then, with the introduction of a real estate agent, he bought the small yard. Everything seemed chaotic. Eric smiled. It was the cautious Asian concept in his bones again. After staying on the balcony for a while, he was about to go back to the study to continue writing Jurassic Park. Suddenly, he heard a ping sound, as if glass had fallen to the ground. Eric looked at the neighbor's house to the west. It was the home of the Runkle couple, a couple in their 40s. The couple had 3 children. The eldest son was already in college, the daughter was studying in boarding school, and the youngest son was only 7 years old. The couple might have encountered a midlife crisis, and they often quarreled during this period. Although Eric's family and the Runkles' family had a good relationship, Eric did not plan to intervene. The couple was very restrained and did not have a record of fighting. If he rushed to intervene, it would only make the other party feel awkward. After a hasty and vague argument and the sound of a few glass breaking, the door of the Runkles' house was pushed open with a bang. The master of the house, Charleston Runkle, rushed out of the door in a shirt, his hair disheveled. He ran 2 steps and turned his head to the woman in the door and shouted, "Enough, I've had enough, damn it, you bitch. If I didn't move to Los Angeles to marry you, I might have been a senior executive of General Motors. Look at you now, oh my God." "Go to hell," Mrs. Runkle, who usually spoke softly, said in a high-pitched and sharp voice. "Of the 3 men who pursued me with you, one is now a California senator, and the other is selling oil in the Middle East. Do you know about oil? The profit of 1 ship is equivalent to 100 years of your salary. I'm the one who should be regretting it. Now, go sleep in your General Motors car, my dear senior executive of General Motors." After Mrs. Runkle finished speaking, she threw out a black coat and slammed the door shut. Charleston Runkle picked up the coat and patted it. He stood up and looked up, just in time to see Eric standing on the balcony. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Eric," Charleston smiled embarrassedly and said to Eric. "It's okay, Charleston. Do you want to come to my house?" Eric said. Charleston shook his head and said, "No, thank you. I plan to go to the bar. When I come back later, Mary's anger should be appeased." After Charleston finished speaking, he nodded at Eric and started his car and drove away. When Eric returned to the house, he remembered the scene of Runkle and his wife quarreling. An idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He sat at the desk and put a piece of paper into the typewriter. The idea just now gradually became clear. For the past 2 days, Eric had been thinking about what he should write for his first script. Now, he had an answer. That script was tailor-made for him. Well, because of the age difference, a lot of details needed to be changed. However, these were not problems. The selling point of the script was not those details. Chapter 3. Jeff, the owner of the Italian restaurant, found that Eric seemed to have changed into a different person these days. He was no longer in a daze. Instead, he was full of energy. He was no longer as awkward as before when he entertained guests. Occasionally, he would even make a few harmless jokes with the guests. There was even one time when Jeff found that Eric was actually skillfully using a somewhat playful but not offensive tone to tease a single lady in her 30s. When they settled the bill, he received 3 times the tip from the lady. "Eric, did something good happen? I found that you have been abnormal recently." During a break, Jeff finally couldn't help but ask. He was still very concerned about the child left behind by his old friend. "Is it obvious?" Eric was stunned and asked. Jeff smiled and said, "Of course, it's written all over your face. Maybe it's because I found a goal to strive for. You know, once a person has an ideal, the whole person will become very excited." "Oh, what ideal? Can you tell me?" "Of course," Eric replied. "I decided that I want to be a director in the future. Hey, I've been writing my first script recently. I'll finish it in 2 days." Director? Jeff was a little surprised. He subconsciously wanted to persuade Eric not to bite off more than he could chew, but then he remembered that this child had just gotten rid of the grief of his father's death and found a goal to strive for. So, he swallowed his words. Eric's body contained the soul of a middle-aged man. Jeff's face only moved slightly, and Eric knew what he wanted to say, but he smiled and didn't care. After all, this was Hollywood. Every year, tens of thousands of people from all over the world came here to pursue their movie dreams, but very few succeeded. It was normal for Jeff to have this idea. That, when you finish writing the script, you can show it to me. You know, I once wanted to be an actor. Don't look at me now. Jeff patted his huge beer belly and continued, I was very handsome back then. You know, I once auditioned for a small role in The Godfather. In the blink of an eye, so many years have passed. Eric was a little dumbfounded. He didn't expect Jeff to have such a past, but he was soon relieved. This was Hollywood, the world's largest film factory. Nothing was impossible. Stallone had also filmed Italian Coach. No problem. You can give me some suggestions when the time comes. Eric replied. He could ask Jeff to check if there were any loopholes in the script. Although Eric had tried his best to edit some things that appeared after 1988 in the script, he could not guarantee that there would be no mistakes. And as an outsider, Jeff could easily discover some things that were out of place in the script. The two of them chatted and laughed for a while. Several guests walked into the restaurant, and Eric hurriedly went forward to greet them. The day's work passed quickly. Eric returned home, had a quick dinner, and began to busy himself with the novel and script of Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was basically finished, and now it was the final proofreading. Eric planned to take some time tomorrow to make a few copies and submit them to several publishing houses. However, he only wrote an outline of the script and some notes that needed to be modified. For Eric, who had the complete image in his mind, it only took him 2 nights to finish writing the script. The next morning, Eric left home at 7 o'clock in the morning. He planned to make a copy of Jurassic Park and mail it out. He had prepared the address of some famous North American publishing houses in advance. Of course, even if these large publishing houses rejected Eric's manuscript, he would not be disappointed. After all, there were tens of thousands of big and small publishing houses in North America. There was bound to be one that would be willing to publish this novel. Although Jurassic Park once rushed to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, Eric did not care about the royalties of Jurassic Park. He only wanted the film and television rights in his hands after the novel was published. "Hello, how can I help you?" As soon as he walked into a printing shop, a thin black female clerk greeted him warmly. Eric took out the manuscript from his bag and said, "I want to make a few copies of this manuscript." The black girl looked at the thick manuscript, and her eyes lit up. Her smile became even brighter. "Sir, can I have a look?" "No problem," Eric said as he handed the book over. The black girl did not pay attention to the content of the manuscript. She skillfully counted the pages and said, "There are about 300 pages. I'll count it as 300 pages. Each copy is $30. Sir, how many copies do you want?" $30. The corner of Eric's mouth twitched. He sighed inwardly at how expensive it was. He only had a few $100s left in cash, and this was under the condition that he paid a month's salary in advance. After shamelessly bargaining, the two of them agreed to make 4 copies for $100. After paying, the black girl politely made a cup of coffee for Eric. Then, she took the manuscript and started making copies. Eric held the cup of coffee in boredom as he watched the black girl operate the photocopier. He secretly calculated the time. It would be done in about half an hour, and it would not affect his work at the restaurant. Although the restaurant would only get busy after 10 o'clock, Jeff would not deduct his salary even if he was late. However, friendship was friendship, and work was work. Eric knew that if he wanted to maintain a good relationship with Jeff, he had to play his part. After about 10 minutes, the door of the printing shop became slightly dark. Eric raised his head and saw a brown-haired white man walking in with a leather bag. The man was about 40 years old. He was less than 1.7 meters tall, but he looked very sturdy. He had brown stubble on his chin, a high-nose bridge, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. His forehead was slightly bald, and he exuded a gentle and scholarly aura. "Welcome, sir. Can you wait for a moment?" The brown-haired man nodded and politely greeted Eric. He sat down beside Eric. The black girl temporarily stopped what she was doing and quickly poured a cup of coffee for the brown-haired man. "Sir, it will be done in about 10 minutes. Please have a cup of coffee first." The brown-haired man took the coffee and thanked her. He followed the black girl's figure and saw the thick stack of manuscripts. His expression changed slightly. There were only 3 people in the shop. The man couldn't help but look at Eric. "Pardon me for asking, but is that your manuscript?" Eric nodded and said, "Yes, it's a novel. I just finished it. I plan to make a few copies of it. You look like a high school student. You're really good. I couldn't do this when I was your age." "Thank you. Actually, This is my first novel. I don't have much confidence in it. No, you have to believe in yourself. Well, can I take a look at your novel? The brown-haired man said. He took out a business card and handed it to Eric. It just so happens that I have a small publishing house. Eric took the business card and looked at it. Michael Krause, the manager of Night Elf Publishing House. Eric's eyebrows could not help but twitch. Fortunately, it was not Michael Clayton. Eric could not help but complain about the lack of creativity in Westerners when it came to naming. In his memory, in Eric's high school class, there were 2 students named Jack and 2 named Jessica. When the scope was expanded to the whole school, there were even more people with the same name. Even when their son was born, they were too lazy to give him a new name. They just called him Robert Downey Jr. anyway. Looking at it won't make you pregnant. Eric took the photocopied manuscript and handed it to Michael Krause. The other party took the manuscript, glanced at the title, and said casually, Jurassic Park, a very interesting name. Eric smiled slightly and did not answer. Michael Krause did not say anything and flipped through the manuscript. As he read more, Michael's casual expression gradually became serious. Although he just praised Eric, he did not think that Eric could write a wonderful novel at his age. In his past work experience, almost all of the best-selling authors were people who were full of life experience and rich accumulation of knowledge. After quickly and carefully reading the manuscript in his hand, Michael carefully sorted out the scattered manuscripts and looked up at Eric. His eyes were full of surprise, excitement, joy, and some determination. Young man, can I know your name? Eric Williams, Eric answered directly without pretense. With his rich experience in his previous life, how could he not see Michael's expression? Although he did not plan to give Jurassic Park to a small publishing house, it did not prevent him from getting to know Michael Krause. In case Jurassic Park was really rejected by a well-known publishing house, this was also an option. Chapter 4. It's like this, Eric. Can you hand this book over to my publishing house? Michael Krause didn't hide his intentions and said straightforwardly. Eric looked at the black girl who had finished printing and was binding the manuscript, then said to Michael Krause, I'm sorry, Michael. Although I appreciate your recognition, you know that I want to try my luck at some of the bigger publishing houses. Just like every parent wants their child to be admitted to an Ivy League school, don't you think so? Michael's expression didn't show the slightest displeasure of being looked down upon. He smiled and said, Eric, do you have a full understanding of those big publishing houses? Maybe we can find a place to talk. I know a coffee shop not far away. I'll treat you. How about it? Eric took the manuscript that the black girl had bound and put it in his bag. He directly refused. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm going to be late for work. If the manuscript is rejected by those publishing houses in the future, I'll contact you. After Eric finished speaking, he took his bag and walked out of the printing shop. He started the car and drove to the Italian restaurant. Michael, who was in the printing shop, only hesitated for a moment. He immediately rushed out of the shop and drove to follow him. He had an intuition that if he missed this opportunity, he might regret it for the rest of his life. 30% of this intuition was because of the novel called Jurassic Park, and 70% was because of Eric, this young man. Although he only read the first half of the novel, Michael was surprised to find that Eric not only incorporated a lot of genetic engineering, chaos theory, nanotechnology, and other high-tech factors into the novel, but also didn't lose the interest of the novel at all. The plot was full of twists and turns and was fascinating. It wasn't that he hadn't seen many examples of incorporating high-tech into novels, but most of them were very awkward. Some novels were even written as popular science books. That kind of novel obviously didn't appeal to all kinds of readers. Eric parked the car in the parking lot. He turned around and saw a black car parked not far away. Michael Krause got out of the car. Apparently, he had followed him. This satisfied the vanity in Eric's heart a little. Unknowingly, he also had a good impression of Michael. Hey, Eric. Michael waved his hand at Eric. Just as he was about to speak, Eric pointed at his watch and said, That, Michael, look, it's almost 9 o'clock. I work as a waiter in this Italian restaurant. Perhaps you don't mind ordering another breakfast? The restaurant is very quiet before 10 o'clock, so we have an hour. Michael nodded and followed Eric into the restaurant. Eric changed his clothes and came out. Michael was already sitting by the window with breakfast in front of him. He was almost done eating. I explained to Mr. Jeff, but you have to hurry up. Eric sat down opposite Michael and said with a smile, although I'm young, I'm not that easy to convince. Michael smiled and said, I believe that after you listen to my explanation, you will definitely let me work on that book. As I said earlier, you might not be familiar with those large publishing houses. It just so happens that I once worked at Simon & Schuster for 11 years. I started from the most basic position of review editor, but I failed to compete for the position of department manager, so I left and founded the Night Elf Publishing House. What does this have to do with what we are going to talk about? As a loser in his previous life, Eric was most afraid of people talking about his struggles. He couldn't help but interrupt. Don't worry, young man. I just want you to know that what I'm going to say next is true. You know, when I first worked as a review editor, I had to review tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of words of manuscripts every day. Although there were a lot of terrible manuscripts, there were also a lot of manuscripts that were worth publishing. At most, the number of books published in a year has reached 2,000. You can imagine, as a newcomer, how much publicity and marketing resources can you get from these thousands of books even if you publish them. After Michael finished speaking, he stopped and took a sip of water to give Eric some time to think. Eric acknowledged Michael's words in his heart, but he didn't say anything. He just signaled Michael to continue. Michael slightly raised his hand and said as if he was giving a speech, although my publishing house is small, I have a lot of experience in book publishing and marketing. Moreover, my publishing house mainly publishes science fiction, adventure, and thrillers. Although I only publish 10 or so novels a year, I already have a certain reputation in the industry. If you give me Jurassic Park, then in the next period of time, I promise to use all the resources at my disposal to publish this novel. In the shortest amount of time, this novel will become famous. Based on my experience, if I put all my effort into it, this novel will very likely rush into the bestseller list. Michael showed all his trump cards and then quietly waited for Eric's decision. Eric was originally a bit distracted by Michael's boasting. Even if he had all the resources at his disposal, how much power could a small publishing house have? Deep down, he was already a middle-aged uncle. In the complicated social circle of his previous life, he had seen all kinds of strange pigs running all over the world. Of course, he wouldn't change his mind just because of Michael Krause's words. However, Michael's words actually poked Eric's heart. Make Jurassic Park famous in the shortest amount of time. No matter what era it was, fame was an invisible but very useful resource. Eric now wanted to realize his plan. His biggest weakness was his age. A young man would naturally give people a feeling of untrustworthiness. But if he had enough fame, this weakness would be covered up very well. If an 18-year-old high school student became a director, everyone would criticize him for acting recklessly and not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. But if an 18-year-old genius writer made a movie, the result would definitely be different. There would definitely be criticism, but more people would definitely say, "Oh, that genius kid is doing something amazing again." Eric probed, "I have to say, Michael, I'm really tempted by your conditions. But this is only your side of the story. I don't know anything about your publishing house." "This is easy to prove," Michael said calmly. "On the recent New York Times bestseller list, there's a book from my publishing house on the list. Although it's last, 20th Century Fox has already bought the movie rights of this book. It's very likely that it will be made into a movie in the next few years." Eric believed Michael's words. He didn't need to lie about something that could be easily exposed. He said, "Then, how about we take some time to talk about the specific cooperation?" Michael was stunned and said in surprise, You agree?" "Yes," Eric nodded and smiled. "To be honest, I can't wait to see my novel made into a book." "Then, how about tonight? I think you might need to work now." Michael pointed at the gradually increasing number of customers in the restaurant. After the two agreed on a meeting place, Michael left the restaurant with satisfaction. "Eric, what did you talk to that person about just now? You seem very happy now?" Jeff asked. Just now, Eric only said that he had something to discuss with a friend, so he was a little curious. Eric handed the menu that the customer had just ordered to his colleagues in the kitchen, and then said to Jeff, who was a guest waiter, "Good news, Jeff, that person just now is the boss of a publishing house. I'm going to publish my novel soon." Jeff was a little confused and said suspiciously, "Novel? Didn't you say yesterday that you were writing a script? Why are you writing a novel now? Have you given up your dream of being a director so quickly and decided to become a writer?" Eric said, "Of course not, my goal won't change easily. Being a director and writing a novel don't conflict, right? By the way, my novel is in my backpack in the dressing room. Jeff, you can take a look and give me some advice or something." Jeff turned around and walked to the dressing room with doubts. He thought that Eric's novel was just a short story of a few thousand words. When he saw the thick manuscript, Jeff's eyes almost popped out. It had to be more than 100,000 words. He had never written so many words in his life. After the busiest lunch hour at noon, they were a little more free. The restaurant staff found that the boss seemed to have disappeared continuously for several hours. This was a very rare thing for the fat man who liked to wander around and show his existence. When the staff were discussing whether to look for the boss, Jeff came out of the dressing room and patted Eric's shoulder. "It's a very good novel. I'm sure of one thing now, you will resign soon." After saying these words, Jeff calmly left. As soon as the boss disappeared, a group of people gathered around Eric and asked him what had happened. So throughout the afternoon, waiters and even kitchen staff took time to go into the dressing room and read Eric's manuscripts. Even after work, a beautiful waitress in the restaurant asked if she could take the manuscripts home to read. Although the beautiful girl's eyes made Eric a little restless, Eric could only politely decline her request. Although the photocopied novels were no longer useful, lending them to her was no big deal. After all, the novel hadn't been published yet, and he didn't want anything to happen before it was published. Taking someone else's work as one's own was a common thing since ancient times. He had personally experienced this in his previous life. Chapter 5. In a coffee shop in North Hollywood, Eric and Michael were discussing the details of the cooperation on Jurassic Park. Eric did not argue about the royalty share. He took the 7% royalty share that was common for newcomers. The two only negotiated and confronted each other about the film and television rights of the novel. With Michael's experience in the industry for more than 10 years, of course, he could see the huge potential of this novel in film and television adaptation. In addition, Eric did not raise any objections to the royalty share, which made Michael feel that Eric was very young and easy to fool. Therefore, he proposed that Night Elf and Eric share the film and television rights, and the film and television rights were fully represented by Night Elf Publishing House. After patiently listening to Michael's proposal, Eric resolutely refused. "That's impossible, Mr. Krause." Michael Krause was taken aback. He seemed to be unable to react to Eric's decisive refusal. After adjusting his emotions, Michael Krause said, "Eric, listen to me, you know, I just sold a novel from our publishing house to 20th Century Fox. That's millions of dollars in adaptation fees. If the author negotiated it himself, he might not even get $500,000. This is the advantage of a publishing house." Then the two talked for more than 10 minutes. Michael Krause tried to persuade Eric to accept his conditions and took the initiative to reduce the publishing house's share of the film and television rights. In the end, Michael Krause was disappointed to find that this kid was not a greenhorn. He was a veteran who had been in society for more than 10 years. Although he was not familiar with the various twists and turns of the publishing world, he could keenly perceive some of the mysteries hidden in the seemingly favorable conditions. What surprised Michael even more was that this young man was not at all impulsive like other young people of his age. Even if he had discovered the trap, he did not point it out directly, nor did he act rashly in the heat of the moment. Instead, he subtly hinted that he understood the trap. In the end, Michael smiled bitterly and gave up his plan to interfere with the film and television rights of Jurassic Park. The negotiations that followed naturally went smoothly, and the two of them quickly signed a cooperation agreement. Nice working with you, Eric. I believe you won't regret letting me manage Jurassic Park. After signing the contract, Michael turned back into the scholarly uncle who made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. It was as if the shrewdness and slyness on his face during the negotiation were just an illusion. Happy cooperation, Michael. I hope so too. The two shook hands and sat down. After chatting for a while, Eric asked casually, Michael, do you have any connections in those film companies? Michael Krause raised his eyebrows. Of course. Why else would I recommend my novel to 20th Century Fox? In fact, I also know some people in other film companies. When I was at Simon & Schuster, I was responsible for cooperation with film companies in the book copyright area. So, Eric, give the film and television rights of Jurassic Park to Night Elf. I can directly recommend the novel to the producers of the 6 major film companies. Eric shook his head and said, Let's not talk about this issue. Michael, I won't give up a single cent of the film and television rights of Jurassic Park. However, I'm currently completing a script. If possible, I hope you can help me recommend it. The hope that Michael Klaus had just ignited was extinguished again. He was not very interested in the script that Eric was talking about. However, out of politeness, he still asked patiently, Can you tell me the general plot of the script? It's like this. Eric sorted out his thoughts and said, 18 years ago, 17-year-old Micah Donnell was about to participate in a very important basketball game because as long as he performed well, he would be admitted to the Ivy League University with a generous scholarship. However, before the game, his girlfriend suddenly told him that she was pregnant. So, during the game, Mike resolutely threw away the basketball in his hand and turned to leave the court, choosing to take on his responsibility. 18 years later, the glory of the past disappeared with the wind. Mike became a middle-aged man with a failed career. At the same time, his marriage with his wife, Scarlett, was about to come to an end. Eric did not go into too much detail. He only briefly recounted the story. After he heard the argument between Runkle and his wife, he quickly thought of Back to 17. To realize his plan, this movie was the most suitable. A 17-year-old young man with the soul of a middle-aged man hidden in his body. This was simply tailor-made for Eric. Michael Krause's eyes became brighter and brighter. He was very optimistic about the young man Eric, but he did not expect that Eric would immediately give him another surprise as soon as he got the novel Jurassic Park. Movies like Back to the Future or Transformation had just become popular in recent years. It was not as common as later generations. Therefore, as long as the quality of the movie was good, it would usually achieve good box office results. Not to mention the annual box office champion, Back to the Future, in 1985. Just this year alone, there were 2 movies in this category that had achieved good box office results. One was Back to 18 in April, and the other was Flying Across the Future, which was only released for 2 weeks and had already recouped its costs. The final box office was likely to exceed 100 million yuan. This movie also made Penny Marshall the first female director in North American film history to surpass 100 million yuan at the box office. This is a good script, Eric. But don't you think that there have been too many time travel movies in recent years? Besides, you're just a newcomer with no fame. In order to take the initiative in the negotiation, Michael certainly had to play a little tricks. The negotiation of the film and television rights of Jurassic Park just now made him feel frustrated. Eric smiled slightly. Of course, he could see that Michael was pretending. He directly stretched out 5 fingers and said, 50% commission. What? Michael was a little incredulous. Why was this guy suddenly so generous? Did he hear it wrong? Eric repeated, Michael, you didn't hear it wrong. If the script is successfully sold, I can give you 50% of the script's remuneration as commission. However, I have a condition. Sure enough, there was no free lunch in the world. When Michael heard Eric's last sentence, he was slightly relieved. Things seemed to be back on track. The other side was still the shrewd little guy. Tell me about it. I want to be the male lead of this movie, which is the young Mike O'Donnell. That's impossible. Michael subconsciously said, even the director may not have the power to decide the role of the movie, let alone a newcomer screenwriter like you. In the distant East, there is an idiom called, man proposes, God disposes. Eric said, if you don't try, how do you know it's impossible? Besides, with the release of Leap to the Future, this possibility will become even greater. Michael Krause was a little confused. What does this have to do with Leap to the Future? Eric casually stirred the hot coffee in front of him with a spoon and said, I think that the box office of this movie is likely to exceed 100 million. If that's the case, for a similar genre and a good enough script, maybe someone will consider my condition. Michael Krause had not seen the movie Leap to the Future, but he still believed Eric's words and said, okay, Eric, I can try, but the commission? Michael, you're too greedy. Do you want to get more than me, the original author? Michael could not help but touch his nose with his index finger and said with a rare embarrassment, it's not as serious as you say. And if you're the male lead, even if you're a newcomer, your salary will be around 500,000 yuan. I think it's not bad to get 200,000 yuan for the script. Although he said this, Michael Krause did not mention the commission. When they were saying goodbye outside the coffee shop, Michael Krause suddenly said, actually, Eric, I have an illusion that you're really suitable for the role of the male lead in your script. Because when we were talking about the contract, I felt like I was negotiating with someone my age and not an 18-year-old high school student. Eric smiled. Don't worry about these details, Michael. I'll give you the script in 2 days. I hope you can bring me good news. Chapter 6. After finalizing the publication of Jurassic Park, Eric spent all of his spare time writing and editing the script for Back to 17. Back to 17 mainly expressed the discussion of family, love, friendship, and life choices, so it wasn't inappropriate to use it in this era. However, the various geeky elements and thumb culture in the movies in his previous life needed to be changed. After all, Big Brother wasn't popular yet, and personal computers were still in the transistor era. Eric changed Ned's setting to be a successful entrepreneur, as well as a hardcore movie fan who liked to collect all kinds of movie props. Of course, this was limited to movies that had already appeared in this era. The lines of the movie Lord of the Rings could only be changed to other movies. For Eric, who had a large number of movies in his head, this was a piece of cake. After completing the script, Eric handed the script to Jeff as promised. Ever since he saw Eric's Jurassic Park, Jeff no longer underestimated the orphan left behind by his good friend. He carefully read the script a few times and found some mistakes in it. For example, when the main character returned to school wearing Kevin Federline's hippie t-shirt, Jeff curiously asked who Kevin Federline was. Eric carefully searched his memory and found that this sweet Britney's second ex-husband was still a 10-year-old boy. After correcting some of the mistakes that Jeff found, Eric quickly handed the script to Michael Krause. After finishing a novel and a script, Eric didn't rush to write a third novel. Instead, he started practicing basketball. Eric didn't have any foundation for the fancy basketball used in the movie, so he had to start practicing from scratch. There were many basketball scenes in the movie. Although Zac Efron's performance in the movie in his previous life wasn't outstanding, there were a few basketball scenes that were remarkable. Especially the scene in the student cafeteria where he used the fancy basketball to teach the bad boy Stan a lesson. It left a deep impression. A week later, Eric, who had been practicing on the community basketball court for 2 hours, walked into his house with fancy basketball moves. He could hear his phone ringing from afar. In the past few days, Eric had been receiving calls from Michael one after another, roughly introducing the publication of Jurassic Park and the script of Back to 17. The publication of Jurassic Park went smoothly, and Eric would soon be able to see the sample book. However, Back to 17 was not so lucky. Although the film companies that received the script were very interested in it after reading it, most of them directly gave up on the script after hearing that the scriptwriter insisted on playing the male lead. This was actually a very normal thing. No one would easily risk tens of millions of dollars of investment. Eric even suggested that Michael should not set his sights on the big 6 film companies, and that he should try those second-tier film companies instead. Hello, this is Williams's house. Eric picked up the phone and said after adjusting his short breath. "Hello, Eric, this is Michael." Eric smiled calmly and said, "Michael, it's almost 10 o'clock in the evening. You must have good news to call at this time, right?" Michael on the other end of the phone couldn't help but complain, "Don't mention this. Damn it, I've called many times since 8 o'clock, but you haven't picked up." "Oh, sorry, Michael. I'm playing basketball at the community sports court." "Playing basketball, wow, Eric, it seems that you are determined to win. I remember that there are a lot of basketball scenes in the script. Of course, I still have the same saying. Man proposes, God disposes. Not only am I practicing basketball, but I'm also practicing in front of the mirror for an hour every morning." "Eric, I admire you a little. Few people are willing to do so much preparation when they have no idea what to do. How about you take a day off tomorrow? We'll go on a date." Eric's hand trembled slightly and the basketball that was spinning on his right index finger fell to the ground. It bounced and made a few muffled sounds. "Is this good news?" "Of course, lucky guy. I received a call from Mr. James Brooks from 20th Century Fox today. They are very optimistic about the script and didn't directly reject your conditions, but you have to pass the audition. This is really, thank you so much, Michael." "You're welcome." Michael smiled and said, "Of course, you have to understand that the other party agreeing to the audition is equivalent to accepting your conditions. But if your performance in the audition is too bad, it can only be said that it's a pity." "Absolutely not. I'm fully prepared." Eric was excited the whole night. Early the next morning, Eric drove to the meeting place with Michael Krause. "This is the filming base of 20th Century Fox?" Eric looked at the huge warehouse-like studio with yearning in his eyes. Michael closed the car door and walked over. He stood side by side beside Eric and looked up at the studio. "Yes, it's spectacular, isn't it? But Warner's studio is even more spectacular. Well, you must have seen it before. If you have the chance, you can visit it." Eric's mind flashed with the familiar title of the movie produced by Warner. He nodded and said, "I will." The two followed a staff member to the door of an office. The guide knocked on the door and said a few words before inviting them in. Seeing the two of them enter, a middle-aged man and a woman who were discussing something in the office stood up and greeted them. Michael Krause stepped forward and shook hands with the two, then introduced, "James, Penny, this is Eric Williams. Eric, this is the producer, Mr. James Brooks, and this is the director, Penny Marshall." After the introduction, Michael Krause smiled at Penny Marshall and said, "You may not know, Ms. Penny, but a week ago, Eric said that you may be the first female director in the history of American film to surpass 100 million yuan at the box office." Eric shook hands with James Brooks first. James just shook hands with Eric lightly and withdrew his left hand in less than a second. Eric was keenly aware that this well-known producer didn't seem to like him very much. After a slight thought, he understood what was going on. For a producer who monopolized the production process of the movie, the guy who recommended himself as the male lead was definitely not liked. Without showing any inappropriate expression, Eric turned to Penny Marshall. She was a blonde white woman in her 40s. She was very fat, so although she was a director and an actress, the roles she played were the kind of small side roles that were not easy to find in the cast list. "Hello, Miss Penny. I like your Flying Over the Future very much." "Thank you for your praise, Eric." Penny Marshall's expression didn't change much. With the continuous release of Flying Over the Future, everyone knew that the box office of this movie was already set to exceed 100 million yuan. In the past week, the weekly box office of the movie not only did not decrease, but it also increased. This was the fourth week of the movie's release. Many movies that were released at this time were likely to be forced to stop due to low attendance. After the mutual introductions, Eric realized that James Brooks and Penny Marshall were looking at him with scrutinizing eyes. Obviously, if the cooperation was successful, James Brooks and Penny Marshall would be the producer and director of Back to 17, respectively. Eric wasn't nervous at all. With a confident smile on his face, he sat down on the sofa with Michael Krause. The beautiful female assistant brought in a few cups of coffee and left the office. James Brooks didn't drink the coffee. Instead, He crossed his arms on the table and said, "Eric? Mr. Eric, your movie script is indeed excellent, but I have to say that the conditions you proposed are a bit harsh. We learn from Michael that you are only a high school student and have no acting experience. So at first, we were going to refuse, but Mr. Barry Diller happened to see your script. He liked the ideas expressed in the script and specially approved your request. Of course, you have to pass the most basic audition. If you pass, you have to undergo short-term acting training." Eric nodded his head in agreement. He was a bit surprised. He didn't expect his script to be approved by Barry Diller. Of course, he knew who Barry Diller was. In his previous life, Disney's CEO Michael Eisner and DreamWorks Animation's helmsman Katzenberg used to be one of Barry Diller's assistants when he was working at Paramount. Barry Diller had dominated Hollywood for more than 30 years. From the rise of Paramount to the prosperity of 20th Century Fox, from the domination of the film industry to the structure of the TV network in America, and later the rise of online media, he left his mark that couldn't be erased. After thinking about it for a few seconds, Eric realized that he was in James Brooks's office when Michael Krause gently poked him. James Brooks's eyes were filled with slight dissatisfaction. From the beginning, he was very resistant to Eric. In the production process of Hollywood movies, the producer usually had the final say, from the selection of the role to the post-production editing. Eric's request for him to be the male lead was undoubtedly depriving him of some of his rightful power. "I'm sorry, everyone. I was distracted." Eric quickly apologized. "It's okay, young man." James slightly emphasized the word young man, and then said, "Then, before we discuss other things, let's audition first." Chapter 7. Eric followed James and the others to a small temporary studio. Looking at the familiar surroundings, Eric was slightly excited. He silently said to the movie equipment around him, "Just you wait, babies. This time, I must become a movie legend that everyone looks up to. I want future generations to remember Hollywood, just like Barry Diller's biography. When people talk about Eric Williams, they will say that he is Hollywood." As the author of the script, he skipped all the questions about the understanding of the role during the audition and directly started the performance. In his previous life, Eric had also been an actor and had appeared in many movies and TV shows. After all, in that circle, if one of his friends had an actor in a production team that matched his image, he would often be pulled over to play a small role with a phone call. He could get a salary of 8 to 10,000 yuan and expand his network. Who knew when he would run into an opportunity? Penny Marshall randomly selected a few scenes for Eric to perform. The first few scenes were very simple. Eric had already practiced for a few days in private. In addition, with the clear image of the original movie in his mind, Eric easily performed. This surprised Brooks and Penny Maxier, who were watching from the side. Eric's performance didn't seem like a newbie with no acting experience at all. If he was at this level during the official shooting, Eric wouldn't even need to go through the short-term training. He could just start preparing for the movie directly. "Next, Eric, try this scene." Penny smiled and handed Eric a script. From her expression, Eric was sure that he had passed this stage. He felt relieved. He was also afraid that he would make a mistake. He looked at the script in his hand. It was the scene on the school stage where Mike comforted his daughter who had broken up with her boyfriend. This scene contained Mike's favorite and one of the movie's most classic lines. "Miss Penny, I need an actress to act with me in this scene." "Of course," Penny Marshall said. She then said to a female staff member next to her, "Teresa, come and act with Eric." This scene was more than 2 minutes long, so Eric and the girl named Teresa prepared for a few minutes. Teresa only needed to roughly remember her lines. After all, she was just a prop. Eric, on the other hand, was seriously experiencing the various emotions shown in this scene. The concern when he saw his daughter cry, the madness when he heard that his daughter might have done something bad with Stan, the clumsiness when he comforted his daughter, and the helplessness when his daughter pounced on him. After they were ready, a staff member shouted, "Action!" and the performance began. Maggie sat on a prop box and pretended to cry. Mike stepped forward with a concerned look on his face. "Hey Maggie, what's up?" "Go away." Maggie hid her hands in her sleeves and ignored Mike's crying. "Hey, what's going on?" Mike sat down next to Maggie. "What are you doing?" Touching my head and saying, "I told you already, didn't I?" "No, no, no, I won't." Mike quickly explained, "I just want to know what happened." "Stan dumped me." "Stan dumped you?" Mike raised his eyebrows slightly. The surprise on his face disappeared in a flash, and then it turned into anger and disbelief. When a father found out that his daughter had broken up with a scumbag boyfriend, of course, he would be happy. But when he realized that it was the man who dumped his daughter, he became angry and disbelieving. In a father's mind, since his daughter was so good, it should be his daughter who dumped the scumbag. What right did the scumbag have to dump his daughter? James Brooks and Penny Marshall, who were watching Eric's performance from the side, were shocked. If Eric's performance earlier could be considered a 60, then this change in facial expression alone could raise Eric's performance to a 90. James started to approve of Eric. To be able to reach his position, he was definitely not the kind of person who would not change his mind once he developed a bad impression of someone. The performance of the two people in the arena continued. Hearing that his daughter might have done something bad with Stan, Mike instantly went crazy. After making sure that nothing bad had happened, he hugged his daughter and scratched his head awkwardly, trying to find the words to comfort his daughter. When you were young, every little thing was like the end of the world. Actually, that's not the case. Everything has just begun. Along the way, you might meet a few scumbags, but one day, you will meet a boy who will hold you in the palm of his hand and surround you like the sun, rising and falling. Really? Of course. You are so considerate. Maggie threw herself into Mike's arms. When Mike found that his daughter's mood towards him was not normal, he hurriedly shrank back, grabbed his school bag and stood up. While inviting his daughter to his party, he resisted his daughter's pouncing. Clap, clap, clap. As soon as the two finished their performance, James Brooks and Penny Marshall could not help but applaud. With their professional vision, of course, they could see how outstanding Eric's performance was. The staff next to them saw the actions of the director and producer and also applauded. Michael Krause grinned and clapped. Although he also felt that Eric's performance was outstanding, after all, he was not a professional. However, he knew from the actions of James and Penny that Eric had passed the audition. This meant that the script of Back to 17 was successfully sold and he could get at least $100,000 in commission. Although he owned a small publishing house and had good results, his total net worth was only $4 to $5 million USD, most of which was in real estate. Getting $100,000 in one go was a huge sum of money for him. After passing the most crucial part of the audition, a lot of things became logical. Eric sold the script for $250,000 and $500,000 respectively and signed the actor's contract. The price of the script was $50,000 higher than expected. This was what Michael had fought for. After all, half of the money belonged to him. As for the remuneration, although Eric's performance was outstanding, he was still a newcomer. $500,000 was reasonable. In the blink of an eye, Eric found that he had more than $600,000. Although the remuneration would be paid after the filming was completed, it still gave him an illusion that it was a lifetime ago. If he had so much money in his previous life, he would definitely have made his own movie. Unfortunately, among the many hard-working people in the industry in his previous life, there were only a few who really became directors. After signing the contract, Eric took the check and left Fox's studio. All that was left was the preparation work for the movie. Although he wanted to get involved and gain some experience, he had just won the favor of the producer and director. He didn't want to give them the illusion that he was meddling in the movie. As for the original plan of the acting class, it was cancelled. In Penny Marshall's words, Eric's performance was perfect. There was no need to waste time on those beginner acting classes. As for the small flaws in his performance, they could be corrected during the filming. He went to the bank with Michael Krause and paid Michael $125,000 after cashing the check. Eric did not feel too bad about this amount of money. Although Michael did not do much, it was enough for him to recommend the script to the right people. If he relied on himself without any connections, who knew when he would be able to sell the script, not to mention the condition that came with it? Then, Jeff resigned as expected. After all, they had worked together for more than a month. Eric invited his colleagues to a small party at home. Jeff and a few older colleagues did not attend. After a night of partying, Eric was drunk by his colleagues and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 8. The moment he woke up, he felt as if his head was stuffed with a stone. After shaking his head a few times, Eric subconsciously reached for the phone next to his pillow. He quickly understood his situation, smiled, and sat up. It was already past 9 o'clock in the morning. This was Eric's bedroom on the second floor of William's house. The blazing summer sun unscrupulously shone through the glass door of the south balcony into the bedroom. It was already August, and before noon, people could already feel the sultry heat of Los Angeles. More than half a month after his rebirth, Eric had been busy with all kinds of things. His whole heart was floating in the air. He didn't even have time to look at the new world he was in. Now that everything had a good start, his whole heart was at ease. The bedroom was very big, more than 30 square meters. After putting in the big bed, wardrobe, desk, museum shelf, and other messy things, it still seemed empty. In his memory, Ralph had thought of dividing the bedroom into 2 rooms, but in the end, he didn't do it because there were only 2 of them in the house. There were enough rooms, and he didn't know what to do with another one. This seemingly sad reason made Ralph depressed for many days, but until his death, Ralph didn't have any action of looking for a wife. He didn't know if every alcoholic man had such a heart-wrenching past. Walking down to the second floor, Eric spent half an hour tidying up the messy living room after the party. After breakfast, he drove out of the house. After spending a few hours, he first went to the store to order a Strauss piano. After leaving the address to the delivery man, Eric went to the bookstore to pick up a thick stack of music arrangement books. Eric didn't want to be a singer on a whim. He did this just to prepare for the movie soundtrack in the future. There were so many classic movies in his mind. If he wanted to perfectly restore them, he had to know some basic music arrangement knowledge. At least, he had to reach the level of being able to write the music in his mind into a staff. Otherwise, he couldn't hum it in front of those professional movie soundtracks in the future. Hollywood was different from the Eastern Mainland's entertainment circle. Many directors in the mainland would look for a composer when they were preparing the soundtrack for their movie. The composer would look at the footage and provide some music. The director would listen to it and clap his hands. And in Hollywood movies, music was a very important part, so the production was always refined. Not to mention the background music, just the theme song alone had emerged from countless classics. Many classic movie interludes were even world-famous, such as Unrestrained Melody from Ghost, My Heart Will Go On from Titanic, New Divide from the Transformers, Young and Beautiful from The Great Gatsby, Let It Go from Frozen, and the good songs in Juno could fill an album. When he returned home with the books, the delivery man quickly brought the piano over. Eric directed the man to bring the piano to the study on the west side of the living room. Although it was called a study, there was not even a bookshelf. There was only a large desk and some other miscellaneous items. Eric's books were all in his bedroom upstairs. Ralph didn't have the habit of reading at all. After the piano was set up, as usual, it was time to try it out. Eric sat in front of the piano and placed his hands on the keys in a very stylish manner. Then, under the horrified and disdainful gazes of the delivery men, he started playing an off-key song, Happy Birthday. Eric glanced at the dumbstruck delivery man and sighed inwardly. Little guys, you're scared. With my standards, I can be considered as both virtuous and artistic in the circle in my previous life. In order to punish the delivery man for looking down on him, Eric directly cut the tip he planned to pay in half. However, the delivery man obviously didn't notice this. Until they got into the car, the tall and skinny white man was still muttering, Strauss, 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 that's more than 20,000 Strauss. His tone was filled with the feeling of a 28-year-old girl marrying an 82-year-old grandpa. This made Eric feel a little embarrassed, but also helpless. He couldn't possibly go up and tell him, Old Young, don't worry, I'll take good care of she air. What audition? Eric asked in confusion. Penny, hasn't my role already been decided? After staying at home for a few days, he spent every day studying music, practicing basketball, and acting. Eric thought that this situation would continue until the movie started shooting. However, after 3 days, he received a call from the director, Penny Marshall. Of course, Eric. I want you to audition for other roles. After all, you're the scriptwriter, so you can give some advice on the role selection, right? Eric cursed in his heart. He probably could only give some advice, but he couldn't make any decisions. However, Eric readily agreed to Penny Marshall's request. He originally wanted to participate in the production of the movie to gain some experience. He drove to Fox's filming location. He saw Penny Marshall and James Brooks. Movie casting was a big deal. Of course, the director and producer had to be present. It was still the same room where he auditioned a few days ago. There were a few other staff members participating in the casting, but Eric was the only young man. There were still more than 10 minutes before the audition began. Penny Marshall took the initiative to talk to Eric about the preparation of Back to 17. The success of Flying Across the Future made 20th Century Fox very confident in our movie. They offered a budget of $20 million. However, they hope that we can finish production as soon as possible and release it during Thanksgiving. Therefore, we have to finish the preparations within 2 weeks and finish shooting the school scenes before the end of the summer vacation. Eric took the audition list from the staff and thanked them. When he heard Penny Marshall's words, he said, "As long as the shooting goes smoothly, 3 months is enough for the movie. There are only a few simple special effects scenes in the movie. It won't take long for post-production." Penny Marshall nodded. "That's true. However, we still need to reserve some time for publicity. By the way, Penny, which roles are we interviewing today?" Eric asked. "Here's the thing. We have invited Dan Aykroyd and Susan Sarandon for the adult role of Mike O'Donnell and Scarlett O'Donnell respectively. James recommended a friend of his for the adult role of Ned. Today, we are mainly interviewing Mike's children, as well as some other young actors in the movie. Therefore, I think you should come and take a look." Although Eric already knew that he, as a screenwriter, was destined to have no say in the selection of other actors, he was still a little depressed when he heard that several actors had been decided without his knowledge. Fortunately, the 2 actors mentioned by Penny Marshall were very much in line with Eric's expectations. As for the role of Ned, James Brooks would never treat the investment of $20 million as child's play. Presumably, the actor would not be too bad. However, Eric was still a little unwilling. He secretly vowed that he must have the right to speak in his own movie in the future. This feeling of being marginalized was really terrible. Depressed, Eric was no longer in the mood to chat with Penny Marshall. Penny Marshall did not notice Eric's abnormality. She turned to the other side and whispered something to James Brooks. Bored, Eric flipped through the list of actors for the audition. The first few names were all male actors, and the pictures were all young and handsome. After flipping through 7 or 8 names, Eric finally found a familiar name: Brad Pitt. Furthermore, the role they were auditioning for was actually Alex. In the original movie, Alex's image was that of a weak bottom. Eric felt that the original version was a little too weak. That small body was a little out of place on the basketball court. According to his analysis, the reason why they chose that thin and weak boy instead of a slightly taller and more handsome male voice was because, other than the need for the plot, the director was definitely worried that this supporting character would suppress the main character, Zac Efron. Zac Efron was only 1.75 meters tall. This height was considered very short among Westerners, especially among Western actors. The audience who watched the movie in his previous life could clearly feel this. Looking at the 25-year-old Pitt, who still looked like a high school student in the picture, Eric suddenly felt that it was not bad to let Pitt play the role of a tall and strong man who was bullied everywhere. In the end, he could turn the tables and shine on the basketball court. Furthermore, Eric was completely confident that his performance would not be suppressed by Brad Pitt. In the future, when Pitt became famous, people would realize that he had acted as Eric Williams' son. Wouldn't that be very interesting? The corners of Eric's mouth curled up slightly. He continued to flip through the list. After that, he did not find any male actors that he was familiar with in his previous life. Next was a thick stack of information on actresses. When he saw the first one, Eric's jaw almost dropped. It was Angelina Jolie. The whole family was here today. Thinking back, Eric realized that Julie should have just graduated from an acting school this year and was preparing to enter high school. She would only start her modeling career next year. He had no idea why she would appear on Maggie's audition list. Western women developed very early. In the picture, the 13-year-old Julie was already slender and elegant. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and her signature sexy lips. She had already begun to exude a faint wild aura. Eric was not optimistic about Julie's audition results. Her participation in the audition might have been the result of her father's influence. As he continued to flip through, Eric found another very interesting girl. "Hey, Penny." Eric turned his head with the information and asked, "What's up with Drew Barrymore? The terrible things she has done in the past 2 years. You know it too. Maybe she's not suitable for our school comedy?" Penny Marshall looked at it and smiled helplessly. Stephen recommended her. That woman shamelessly begged him. He was so annoyed that he recommended her. However, Stephen also hinted that we don't have to consider him at all. So, you understand. Steven Spielberg? Penny Marshall nodded. Yes, you know. Stephen is Drew's godfather. Eric nodded. Then, the woman that Penny's tone was full of disgust should be Drew's greedy mother. In just a few minutes, through the clues that Eric heard and saw, he found that Hollywood's selection of actresses was not as fair and transparent as the media said. It was still full of all kinds of relationships and games. Just as he was about to flip through the list, Penny Marshall patted Eric and said, "Okay, Eric, tidy up. The audition is starting." Eric had to arrange the list of actors in order and wait for the next audition. He thought that he would be a decoration. At most, he would provide 1 or 2 dispensable opinions and ask a few questions symbolically. Unexpectedly, the first young actor came in and answered a few questions. After the performance began, Penny Marshall said to Eric with a smile, "Eric, go up and act with Mr. Watson." Eric shrugged, looked at the script and walked forward. The 5th actor walked out of the audition room. Eric sat back in his seat and complained jokingly, "Penny, I thought you called me to be a referee. I didn't expect it to be a basketball on the court." "Haha, it's a very interesting metaphor. Don't complain, Eric. It was James' idea. He complained that I cancelled your acting class. Finally, we discussed this method to let you practice acting." Eric pretended to be angry and glared at James Brooks, who acted as if nothing had happened. He complained, "Then why didn't you say it directly? You know it now, don't you?" Penny Maxier smiled. "Okay." Eric spread his hands speechlessly. Chi Dien. Com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dien Originals. Chapter 9. This Brad Pitt seems to be a little taller than Eric, and a little older? The last audition candidate, Brad Pitt, walked out of the room. The audition stopped for a while, and James Brooks began to discuss with a few of the people in charge. Penny Marshall said, "Yeah, number 7, Blake Quinn, is not bad." The other people in charge also expressed their opinions. Eric looked at number 7's profile. He was a blonde 17-year-old Caucasian youth, 1.7 meters tall, and a little thin. He indeed matched the image of Alex in his previous life, but it was not what Eric wanted. Eric could not help but say, "Penny, I think Blake Quinn is too weak." Although he matches the image of a bullied high school student in the early stages of the movie, in the later stages of the movie, such a thin and weak boy showing off on the basketball court will be very abrupt and give the audience a false feeling. I just graduated from high school, and I know very well that it is impossible for such a thin and weak boy to appear on a high school basketball team, let alone be chosen by a scout. James Brooks heard Eric's analysis and nodded in agreement. That is indeed the case. Eric, Which actor do you think is suitable? What about Brad Pitt? Penny Marshall said, but Brad Pitt is a little taller than you. Eric shrugged and said, height is not a problem. It is very common for children to be taller than their parents. Moreover, his image can make the contrast between Alex and before not seem so abrupt. James asked, what do you mean? First, we have to confirm that Brad Pitt's acting is not a problem. Although he has not starred in a movie, he has acted in many TV dramas, and his performance in the audition just now was not bad. Therefore, he can completely show Alex's self-abased and weak character in the early stages of the movie. Later, with Mike's encouragement and training, he will bravely show himself and pursue his girl. Look, he has this kind of potential to begin with. After he explodes, the audience won't feel that it's fake. Instead, they'll feel that, oh, Alex is just like that. Several people around him nodded in agreement with Eric's point of view. Eric could see that James Brooks was also a little moved, but he did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he said, well, we'll discuss this later. Let's start the audition for the actress. The first one to audition was naturally Angelina Jolie. The girl was natural and unrestrained when she answered the questions, but her performance wasn't satisfactory. It was full of the exaggerated style of a stage play, causing Eric to almost fall into a ditch. If Eric had the power to choose actors, he might give Julie a small role. After all, it was very interesting to collect future superstars in his movie. Unfortunately, he didn't have much say at this time. After a few more girls, Drew Barrymore walked in. She had her trademark sweet baby face and wore a white tank top that exposed her navel. The black shoulder straps of her undershirt were faintly discernible from time to time with her movements. Below, she wore a white pleated skirt that reached her knees, revealing part of her calves. She wore black leather boots on her feet. If one only looked at her appearance, she was just a young and beautiful girl who matured prematurely. No one would associate her with words like alcohol and drugs. Sitting down on the chair opposite, Drew Barrymore stroked the hair in front of her forehead and found the young Eric sitting next to several middle-aged men and women in their 40s and 50s. Because the level of the reference was too low, his young and angular face was unusually handsome in her eyes. Drew's red lips curved into a mischievous smile and she naturally threw a glance at Eric. James and the others frowned and looked at Eric at the same time. Eric looked back innocently. Hey, why are you staring at me? I'm innocent. In the end, James said, okay, Drew, calm down. Let's start. No problem, Mr. Bruce. With a sweet smile, Drew instantly turned into a well-behaved girl next door. Eric really wanted to shout, watch out for my stick, old son, will take care of you. Stop, Maggie, I'm not that kind of person. The scene was in Ned's bedroom. Maggie and Mike had another scene together. Mike kept dodging his daughter's pouncing. No, you are. No, I'm not. You're a good person. You're different from them. I'm very different from them. I'm very different from them, Mike said in a fluster. The little lion, who was in heat, suddenly understood something. She couldn't help but sit on the bed in disappointment. With a distressed look, she said, oh, I understand. What? What do you understand? Your hair is already so neat, but you still want to make it more conspicuous. What did you say? Mike was even more puzzled. I mean, buddy, are your jeans too skinny? Mike looked down in confusion and suddenly said, no, I'm not gay. I'm in love, Maggie. I fell in love with a girl when I was 17. Maggie, who was relieved, stood up and quickly asked, is she from our school? Do I know her? What's her name? I want to know her name. Okay. Maggie leaned close to Mike and rubbed his face like a mother. Tell your girlfriend to keep an eye on you. Ow, ow. Everyone in the room was fascinated by the two people's performances. If it wasn't for the setting, it wouldn't have mattered if the two people's performances were directly used in the movie. Some people couldn't help but sigh in their hearts that God was really unfair to give these two people such outstanding acting talent. The person in charge of the audition had been in the industry for many years and had seen many actors who had acted for many years. It wasn't that they didn't work hard, but they still received a lot of bad reviews. But these two young people seemed to be born with a natural talent for acting. What they didn't know was that Drew's talent was genuine, but the other guy was cheating. He had accumulated some acting experience in his previous life, and with the scenes in his mind, if he didn't act well, he would have to take a test of his IQ. Eric, your performance is really outstanding. I heard that you're the screenwriter of this movie. That's amazing. When the scene ended, Drew looked at Eric curiously. Eric nodded. Thank you, but you're better than me, Miss Drew. Thank you for the compliment. Drew generously reached out her small hand. Eric also reached out his hand and shook hers. At the same time, he felt the girl tickle his palm twice. Eric smiled. He didn't feel good about himself and thought that this was a special hint. Maybe Drew just felt that he had the right to choose the role, so she wanted to use this teasing method to make him slightly more inclined towards her. But she didn't know that she was only called to practice her acting. After Drew Barrymore left, the people in charge were silent. They all knew how Drew got the audition opportunity. Originally, they just wanted to deal with it, but in the end, she was naturally eliminated. Unexpectedly, Drew was the one with the best performance so far. For the rest of the audition, everyone, including Eric, was a little absent-minded. After nearly an hour, when it was close to noon, Eric finally realized that there was only one audition form left. He casually glanced at the name, Jennifer Aniston. Wow, in less than a second, Eric reacted and exclaimed in his heart, America's sweetheart, in real life. James Brooks said, Miss Jennifer Aniston, can you introduce yourself first? Jennifer Aniston keenly felt that the only young man opposite her was looking at her strangely. It was a slightly fanatical emotion, which made her feel a little proud and a little reserved. After introducing herself, the director let the boy act with her for a few scenes and then ended the audition. It was obvious that the people at the audition were a little out of it. Maybe they had already decided on the actor. Jennifer Aniston thought in disappointment. Her parents were both in the industry, so she knew more about the industry than outsiders. However, she still tried her best to complete her performance. It would be good if she could get a few small roles. Only when Jennifer Aniston left the audition room did Eric reluctantly withdraw his gaze. Just like the information he saw in his previous life, Jennifer Aniston was indeed a little plump, but she couldn't be considered fat. Moreover, with a height of 1.67 meters, after wearing high heels, she still had a graceful figure of a young girl. However, because of the factor of fat on screen, Jennifer Aniston's shortcomings would be magnified. Why, Eric, do you like this girl? I have to say, her smile is really sweet. Penny Marshall's teasing voice suddenly sounded beside him. The others also noticed Eric's gaffe and laughed. Eric came back to his senses and scratched his head awkwardly. Penny, don't laugh at me, I just. James Brooks organized the information in his hands and laughed. How can I laugh at you, Eric? If you like her, maybe you can chase after her and send her home. You see, the audition is over. Of course, if you want to stay and have a working meal with us old guys, then forget it. I think. Let's forget about it. Eric felt that if he did this, it would be a little abrupt. It would be bad if he caused Jennifer Aniston to dislike him. Hey, Eric, be bold. James Brooks encouraged him. In this vast sea of people, once you miss some good girls, it will be difficult to meet them again. Although this girl's body is a little plump and affects her looks on screen, her sweet smile can make up for it. So if you chase after her now, I can give her a small role as one of Maggie's 3 good friends. This will give you more opportunities to interact with her. Really? Thank you so much, James. I'll leave first. Eric originally wanted to ask James to give Jennifer Aniston a chance, but before he could think of how to ask, James Brooks took the initiative to bring it up. After Eric finished speaking, he quickly packed his backpack and rushed out of the room amidst the encouraging laughter of everyone. Chapter 10. Jennifer Aniston absent-mindedly stood by the roadside waiting for a taxi. She wasn't very disappointed with the audition. She didn't have much hope in the first place. After graduating from the Performing Arts School last year, she had acted in a few stage plays one after another. By chance, she heard about the recruitment of actresses for this movie and tried to submit her resume. She didn't expect to get the chance to audition. Just as she was about to flag down a taxi, she heard someone call her name from behind. She turned around and saw the strange boy in the audition room who was staring at her fiercely. "Hello, you are that?" Jennifer Aniston subconsciously waved her hand twice, only to realize that she didn't know the other party's name. Eric reached out his hand and said, "Miss Jennifer Aniston, hello, my name is Eric Williams." Jennifer Aniston reached out her small hand and politely smiled. "Hello, Mr. Williams." Eric looked at Jennifer Aniston's sweet smiling face up close and was slightly absent-minded. He even forgot to let go of Jennifer Aniston's hand. "Mr. Williams, you..." Jennifer Aniston slightly struggled. Feeling the warmth from the big hand, she was a little embarrassed and stared at Eric reproachfully. "Oh, sorry, just call me Eric." "Miss Jennifer Aniston, can I call you Anne?" Eric withdrew his hand and awkwardly scratched his head. He thought to himself, although I didn't have a lot of experience with women in my previous life, I was still a womanizer. Why am I acting like a young boy now? It must be the hormones of this body. Yes, it must be so. Jennifer Aniston was doubtful with a hint of vigilance. "Okay, Eric, but we don't seem to know each other, right?" Eric put away his thoughts and smiled. "Don't we know each other now? All friends are strangers at the beginning. And, it's already noon, can I invite you to lunch?" "That's too abrupt, Eric. We've only exchanged a few words." Jennifer Aniston refused. "Then I'll send you home." Eric settled for the next best thing. All right." Jennifer Aniston was stunned for a moment. She had already rejected him once. Jennifer Aniston, who was never good at rejecting others, subconsciously agreed. In fact, Eric was just using a little social trick. If he had offered to send the girl home right from the start, what would he do if he was rejected? He couldn't pester her, right? That would only have the opposite effect. The two of them got into Eric's car together. After asking for the address, Eric started the car and drove towards the destination. Jennifer Aniston couldn't hold back her curiosity and asked, "Eric, are you a staff member of Back to 17? Eric held onto the steering wheel and nodded. "Yeah, I'm the scriptwriter and the male lead of this movie." "Wow, that's amazing. You should be the same age as me. I've only played a few small roles in a few stage plays." Eric smiled and said, "I'm just lucky." "By the way, you said you're acting in a stage play?" "Oh yeah." When it came to things that interested her, Jennifer Aniston immediately opened her mouth and chattered on. Eric interjected a few words from time to time, making Jennifer Aniston chuckle. How could a 19-year-old girl who had just entered society for less than a year be a match for Eric, who had the soul of a middle-aged man hidden in his bones? Under Eric's subtle guidance, Jennifer Aniston gradually opened up as the conversation progressed. She even began to talk about her current life in Los Angeles. "Although working in a convenience store is very tiring and I have to stand for at least 8 hours a day, I feel that my life is very fulfilling now. From time to time, I can act in some stage plays and participate in some auditions. I believe that even if I don't rely on my irresponsible father, I will be successful one day." Although Eric knew that in his previous life, Jennifer Aniston finally joined the television industry under the introduction of her father, in the parallel universe, it was already 2 years later. In his memory, Jennifer Aniston in his previous life resented her father for abandoning her and her mother when they were young. For more than 2 years, she refused her father's help and wasted more than 2 years in Hollywood. In the end, Jennifer Aniston's father, John Aniston, took the initiative to do something to ease the relationship between father and daughter. Only then did the stubborn Jennifer Aniston accept his help. When she got the role in Friends, Jennifer Aniston was already 25 years old. In Hollywood, once an actress passed the age of 30, if her career didn't improve, it would be difficult for her to develop further. It had to be said that Jennifer Aniston was still very lucky. At this time, when Eric heard Jennifer Aniston's words, he still encouraged her, I also believe that. In the audition just now, your performance was very outstanding. There weren't too many traces of stage play and it seemed very natural. Well, at the beginning, when a girl participated in the audition, her stage play style almost brought me in. Speaking of the audition just now, Jennifer Aniston suddenly became silent. After a while, she softly asked, "Eric, was the role of Maggie already decided before my audition?" "I have to say, and your eyesight is indeed very sharp. I found that you were a little absent-minded. Maybe you were just going through the motions." Eric didn't beat around the bush and directly said, "If nothing unexpected happens, Maggie will probably be played by Drew Barrymore. Her performance in the audition was very good." Drew Barrymore, the cute little girl in E.T.? She should be 13 years old now. Isn't Maggie a high school student about to go to college? Eric curiously asked, "Why, and, when you were waiting for the audition, didn't you see Drew?" She is now a big girl, although, well, she is indeed only 13 years old. Jennifer Aniston was a little embarrassed and said, "Well, for today's audition, I changed shifts with my colleagues last night. I was on duty until midnight, so I came a little late." "It's okay. Actually, I don't know if I should tell you." Jennifer Aniston looked up curiously and asked, "What is it?" "After you left just now, they all saw that I, like you." Jennifer Aniston's small mouth suddenly opened. She was a little surprised by Eric's directness and became a little hesitant, and then? "James, who is the producer of this movie, said to me that some good girls, once you miss them, you will never meet them again, so he encouraged me to chase after them. He also said that if I did so, he would give you a role and create more opportunities for us to get along." Eric exposed James in one breath and secretly apologized to James Brooks, thinking that it was not easy for him to pick up a girl. Facing Eric's confession, Jennifer Aniston was a little flustered, but at the same time, there was a trace of sweetness in her heart. Eric saw Jennifer Aniston's panic and quickly said, "No, you don't need to feel burdened, Anne. We are friends now, aren't we? It's normal for friends to help each other. Actually, the role is nothing. It's just one of Maggie's 3 good friends and a few minutes of screen time. But if you accept it, it will provide you with qualifications for future auditions. I believe that my movie will definitely achieve good results." "Thank you, Eric. I really don't know what to say." The car drove for more than 10 minutes and arrived at a residential area in Burbank. Jennifer Aniston pointed at the intersection in front and said, "Eric, I'm here. Just park there." The car stopped at the entrance of a somewhat narrow alley. The two of them were silent for a few seconds. Jennifer Aniston did not move to get out of the car. Eric was certainly not stupid enough to ask Jennifer Aniston to get out of the car. After sitting quietly for a while, the atmosphere in the car gradually became a little ambiguous. In the end, Jennifer Aniston gathered her courage and said, "How about I treat you to lunch, Eric? There's a small restaurant in front. I often eat there." Eric felt relieved and said, "How can that be, Anne? It's not appropriate for a girl to treat you." "Of course, I'll pay the bill. Let's go. You lead the way." Jennifer Aniston finally accepted the role. In the following period of preparation for the movie, the two of them talked on the phone almost every day. The content of their conversation was very scattered. For example, someone stole from the convenience store where Anne worked. She was almost late because she was too sleepy in the morning. She found a few cockroaches in her closet and so on. Eric also talked about trivial things in his life from time to time. At the same time, he comforted the loneliness in the heart of a girl who was alone in a foreign land. Although Jennifer Aniston was in contact with many people, she did not have many friends that she could confide in. In a short period of time, Eric had become her spiritual sustenance. Eric knew that as long as he confessed, Jennifer Aniston would definitely agree to be his girlfriend, because the girl occasionally began to act coquettishly to him on the phone. However, Eric was not in a hurry to do so. He did not want Jennifer Aniston to have any bad associations between the movie role and being his girlfriend. Therefore, he had to at least wait until the filming of Back to 17 was over. Anyway, The girl could not escape from him in her current state. Therefore, Eric only needed to wait for everything to fall into place. During this period, another thing had taken shape, and that was the publication of Jurassic Park. After signing the contract with Michael Krauss for more than half a month, he finally got the sample book of Jurassic Park. The cover was a Tyrannosaurus Rex chasing a running off-road vehicle. It was quite a sci-fi idea. The inspiration came from the movie Jurassic Park, in his memory. Michael Krauss thought it was great. The combination of ancient dinosaurs and modern off-road vehicles set a suspense for the readers just by the cover. Eric specially asked for an extra copy and gave it to Jennifer Aniston. These days, Eric had unknowingly left an image of a gentle and considerate boyfriend in Jennifer Aniston's heart. For Jennifer Aniston, who had lacked fatherly love since she was young, this had a strong impact on her. After receiving the copy of Jurassic Park, Jennifer Aniston, who admired Eric's screenwriting and acting skills, suddenly had a little admiration in her eyes. Naturally, she labeled Eric as a genius in her heart. The preparations for Back to 17 were still in progress. During this period, Eric participated in several preparations and met with the other actors in the crew. As for the role of Mike's son, the crew did not choose Brad Pitt. Of course, they did not choose the skinny boy named Blake Quinn either. Instead, they chose another slightly stronger 18-year-old boy. Eric did not have any complaints about this, because he later met Jennifer Aniston. Because of certain issues, Eric did not have a good impression of Pitt, who had abandoned Jennifer Aniston in his previous life. Eric even had a wicked thought. In the future, when he became a famous director, would he let the superstar couple of Pitt and Julie, from his previous life, play a supporting role in his movie? Yes, Jennifer Aniston would definitely be the lead. Everything went smoothly. On August 16, 1988, after Eric's rebirth, the first movie that carried the ideals of his previous life officially started production. Chapter 11. Cut. Very good. Eric, take a break and get ready for the next scene. Penny Marshall clapped her hands and told the crew to get ready for the next scene as soon as possible. At this time, Eric was wearing a wet loose suit and was acting out the scene where he asked about the old janitor's whereabouts in the school corridor. It was the afternoon of the first day of shooting. The location was a private high school in Beverly Hills. After the high school's board of directors understood the content of the script, they readily agreed to provide the crew with a filming location for free. However, the premise was that the name of Hyde High School in the script had to be changed to this high school's name. This was a win-win situation. The crew would get the location for free and save a lot of money, and the high school would be promoted through the film. After a simple discussion, the crew agreed to the school's board of directors' request. In the morning, they tried to shoot some simple scenes and the results were good. Therefore, in the afternoon, they began to shoot the scene where Mike transformed and went to the school to look for the old janitor. Eric, your outfit is too shabby. You look like those dirty homeless people in the downtown area. Drew Barrymore sat on a chair with his legs crossed and mocked without a care for his image. Of course, Eric didn't care about the words of a 13-year-old girl. He casually replied, "Hey Maggie, that's not something a girl should say." Drew curled his lips. "Humph, as an 18-year-old virgin, you really talk big." At this time, Jennifer Aniston happened to come over with a towel. Hearing Drew mocking her sweetheart, she immediately retorted, "You're 100 times better than those bad women." Drew didn't care about Jennifer Aniston from head to toe. Then, he opened his big eyes and revealed a mocking smile. He deliberately twisted his slender waist seductively on the chair. It had to be said that this move was very lethal. Jennifer Aniston was a little self-conscious about her voluptuous figure, let alone in front of the boy she liked. She immediately threw away the towel in her hand and pounced on Drew like an angry cat. Although Jennifer Aniston had a sweet face, if she didn't have a shrewish personality, how could she protect herself well in Los Angeles? Seeing that a cat fight was about to break out, Eric hurriedly stopped Jennifer Aniston and pulled her little hand to sit beside him. He intimately bit her ear and whispered something. Jennifer Aniston cutely shrunk her neck and felt Eric's breath. After a while, she giggled and lightly punched Eric's shoulder. she said coquettishly. Eric, you're so bad. How could you say that? Drew secretly pricked up his ears, but didn't hear what Eric had just said. He could only wrinkle his little nose, pretend not to care, and turn his head to the side. Eric, get ready for the next scene. Okay. Penny. Eric patted Jennifer Aniston's little hand, stood up, and walked to the set. As for why Drew was targeting Eric, it all started in the morning. Because it was a school scene, Drew and Jennifer Aniston had joined the set at the beginning. Although Eric and Jennifer Aniston hadn't revealed their relationship, everyone could see that Jennifer Aniston was attached to Eric. Regarding this, some people teased, some envied, and of course, there were also people who didn't like it, such as Drew. He didn't know why, but whenever he saw the two of them together, even if they weren't doing anything intimate, Drew would feel inexplicably uncomfortable, especially when Jennifer Aniston occasionally showed a happy little girl's face. Therefore, Drew couldn't help but mock Eric. In just one morning, everyone in the crew knew that Eric and Drew had a conflict. However, when the two of them appeared in front of the camera together, they were very professional, and there were very few NGs. Because it didn't affect the filming, Marshall only hinted to Eric to be a little more tolerant of Drew. After knowing Eric for half a month, Marshall had already discovered that Eric was far more mature and steady than his peers. Hey, big fat girl, what did that guy say to you just now? Drew couldn't help but pretend not to care and asked casually. Poor guy, I'm warning you. After Eric's counseling, Jennifer Aniston didn't react as strongly as before, but because the boy she liked wasn't by her side, her words became bold. Poor guy me. Drew's heart slightly trembled, but on the surface, he revealed an expression of disbelief as he looked at Jennifer Aniston. Aha. Jennifer Aniston slightly raised her cute chin and proudly squeezed out a syllable. Aha, that's funny. I'm one of the female leads of the movie, and you're just a small character with a 2-minute scene. What right do you have to call me a poor guy? Jennifer Aniston said, so what, even if you're the female lead, you're just a money-making tool in your mother's hands. But I'm different. Although I'm just a small character, I have freedom, I have dreams, and I have a talented, gentle, and considerate boyfriend. He's only 18 years old, but he wrote a script and acted as the male lead, and he's about to publish a novel. As for you, your father treats you as if you don't exist, and your mother treats you as a money-making tool. You're not reconciled, but there's nothing you can do. You can only give up and indulge yourself, drinking, taking drugs, and even promiscuous sex. You even foolishly thought that these were a rebellion against reality. When you saw me being intimate with Eric, you, who lacked love, became jealous. So you're just a poor guy who has no one to love, and no freedom. Boom. As if an atomic bomb exploded in his mind, Drew felt like he was suddenly stripped naked and thrown in the middle of a busy city, without any privacy to speak of. No matter how mature he appeared to be, Drew was only a 13-year-old girl. Most girls at this age had just entered junior high school. They were ignorant, curiously looking at the new world around them, and looking forward to their upcoming first love. Jennifer Aniston's analysis of the human heart tore open the wound that Drew carefully buried under the fragile disguise. Seeing Drew suddenly become silent, Jennifer Aniston, who thought she had won, revealed a satisfied smile. If Eric was here, he would definitely stop Jennifer Aniston from saying such words that a 13-year-old girl couldn't bear. After successfully completing a few scenes, Eric returned to the rest area again. He was surprised to see Drew curling up her legs in front of her body and burying her head in her arms. She was silent. He curiously asked Jennifer Aniston, "And what's wrong? Why are you two so quiet?" Jennifer Aniston proudly said, "Hey," she was speechless by my refutation. "Oh, and you're really good. Drew's clever little mouth isn't that easy to deal with. Well, let's go. You're going on stage. Do well and try to leave a good impression on the director." "I will." The two of them walked intimately towards the filming location. This small disturbance seemed to have passed quietly, but was it really so? In the following scenes, Drew didn't show any abnormalities. She just spoke a lot less and didn't pick on Eric anymore. Eric, who put all his attention on the shooting of the movie and Jennifer Aniston, didn't notice Drew's abnormal behavior. Unbelievable. The shooting went so smoothly. After finishing the last scene of the day, Penny Marshall took the shooting schedule and sketched it with a pen. She said to Eric, "Originally, we planned to finish the shooting of the school scenes in 10 days. But according to this progress, it might take less than a week. Although I said it many times during the audition, I have to say, Eric, your performance was beyond everyone's expectations. Do you really have no acting experience?" Eric smiled and said, "Of course not, Penny. Actually, I lied. I acted in many movies in my previous life. Although I wasn't the lead, I still accumulated a lot of experience. Fortunately, I still haven't forgotten it in this life." "Wow, in your previous life, this is the theory of Eastern Buddhism, right?" Penny Marshall took Eric's honest words as a joke and said, "Well, your little girlfriend is waiting for you. Go, don't be late tomorrow." "See you tomorrow, Penny. See you tomorrow." Eric started the car and left the shooting location with Jennifer Aniston. No one noticed that Drew Barrymore, who was standing alone in the crowd, stared at the car in the distance and murmured with resentment, "Wait and see, Jennifer Aniston, you little bitch. You hurt me like this. I'll teach you a lesson. I'll make you regret every word you said today." Chapter 12. Eric, do you also think that I should lose weight? Jennifer Aniston, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, blushed and looked out of the window. She seemed to be looking at the traffic flow as she casually asked. Eric pursed his lips and organized his words. "And, in my eyes, you will always be the most beautiful. But I think that if you want to have a bigger development in Hollywood, you should at least lose weight to about 100 pounds. Umph. Stinky man who doesn't mean what he says. You finally couldn't help but say it, right? You also think that I'm fat." Jennifer Aniston snorted, but there was no anger in her tone. Instead, there was a hint of coquettishness. Eric was speechless. "You're the one who asked." "Okay, I apologize. In order to express my apology, how about we go to eat Italian food?" Jennifer Aniston hesitated and said softly, Why don't we go to my house? I just learned how to cook a few dishes. You can try them for me." Eric said without hesitation, "It would be my honor." This was the first time that Eric came to Jennifer Aniston's little house. It was a very exquisite one-bedroom with various warm decorations and dolls. The air was filled with the unique fragrance of a girl's house. Eric wanted to help, but he was driven out of the kitchen by Jennifer Aniston. He could only sit in the living room and read Jennifer Aniston's fashion magazine. An hour later, Jennifer Aniston brought the last dish of soup to the table. She clapped her hands and said proudly, "How is it?" Eric sniffed and praised, "It's great. It's appetizing just by smelling it. I can't wait." "Hee, thank you, Eric." The two of them sat down and enjoyed the soup together. It had to be said that Jennifer Aniston's cooking was really good. While eating, Jennifer Aniston suddenly stood up and said to Eric, "By the way, Eric, when I went downstairs to buy condiments, I saw something about you. Let me show it to you." With that said, Jennifer Aniston stood up excitedly and took out a newspaper from her convenience bag. She returned to the dining table and spread the newspaper in front of her. While Eric was wondering what Jennifer Aniston was doing with the newspaper, Jennifer Aniston began to read with a little pride, Eric Williams, in Jurassic Park, with his own genius creativity, genetic engineering, embryo theory and other scientific foundations, he showed us a highly operable concept of dinosaur resurrection. And through the hands of Dr. Hardman, he created a shocking dinosaur paradise on Nubra Island. However, this was just the beginning. The appearance of the chaos scientist, Malcolm, brought us into another possibility. Jennifer Aniston read until here, skipped the middle section of the book review and directly skipped to the end. What's even more surprising is that the author of the novel, Mr. Eric Williams, is only 18 years old this year. Moreover, according to our understanding, this genius boy has a rather bumpy background. Eric resisted the urge to cover his face. Without a doubt, what followed next was the great American dream. Of course, Eric also added in the classic scene from the talent shows in his previous life. He reached out and took the newspaper from Jennifer Aniston and said, "Okay, and stop reading." Jennifer Aniston waved her small hand unhappily and tried to snatch back the newspaper. Hey, we're about to get to the point. They're praising you. Hey, why do you look so weird? Actually, Eric crumpled the newspaper into a ball and threw it directly into the trash can next to the dining table, then said, "If you want to hear it, I can recite it to you." Ah. Jennifer Aniston's small mouth opened slightly and looked at the newspaper in the trash can. "So you've read it?" "But I haven't read it yet." "Eric, you're really despicable." "It's not like that." "Actually, I wrote this article." Jennifer Aniston was shocked. "Wow." Eric said somewhat guiltily, "Isn't the novel published?" "In order to promote it, we usually hire people to write some book reviews and publish them in the newspaper. A few days ago, Michael came to me and said that no one knows his novel better than I do. He asked me to write a few book reviews and publish them. Coincidentally, the one you just read is one of them." "Wow." Eric shrugged and said shamelessly, "Actually, it's nothing. And this is a very normal promotion behavior. Everyone does it." "Eric." "Yes? You're really too shameless." After Jennifer Aniston finished speaking, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed loudly on the dining table without caring about her image. After that, of course, there were no more performances. Jennifer Aniston used the reason that her pure heart was tainted by Eric's shameless behavior as an excuse to chase Eric out of the house right after dinner. 3 days later, Jennifer Aniston finished her scenes in school. She only had to show her face in 2 party scenes, but that had to wait until the school filming was completed. Therefore, Jennifer Aniston temporarily returned to the convenience store to be a salesperson. At the same time, Eric noticed that Jennifer Aniston had been listless for the past 2 days. After asking, he found out that Jennifer Aniston had started to become listless. If not, it was because she was hungry. Eric advised her not to be so anxious, it would hurt her body, but it didn't work. In addition, Drew occasionally looked at him with faint eyes on the set these days, like a hungry kitten that could pounce on him and bite him at any time. This kind of classic scene in horror movies made Eric feel very frightened. Moreover, when Jennifer Aniston wasn't paying attention, Drew would sneak up on him. On the first day of filming, Drew mocked and ridiculed his performance. Eric just smiled and let it go. Even if Drew was still like that, Eric wouldn't care. But looking at Drew's current state, Eric really wanted to ask her, "Great aunt, what kind of godly development is this? Can't you just directly stab me?" The second day after Jennifer Aniston left the set, on the set. "Eric, do you want water? Can I get you a bottle?" Drew asked Eric sweetly during a break in filming. Eric subconsciously refused. "Ah no, thank you, Drew. I'm not thirsty." Drew didn't insist. Soon, Drew came over with 2 bottles of purified water and directly threw one to Eric. "Here, take it." Eric had to take it. Drew sat down on the chair next to Eric and gently moved the chair to Eric's side. She basically leaned on Eric before stopping. "Well, Drew, maybe we should talk. I want to know what happened. You know, I have a girlfriend." In fact, these words were just an excuse for Eric. The main reason was that Eric was not interested in Drew's chaotic life. "It's very simple. I like you," Drew said directly as she moved her face closer. Pfft. Eric spat out a mouthful of water. This girl was really direct. But I. If he said that he didn't feel anything after being confessed to by a beautiful girl, it would be too pretentious. Eric was speechless for a moment. Since the topic was out in the open, Drew didn't have to be so secretive. Anyway, Jennifer Aniston had left the set. Drew could brandish her little hoe with great fanfare. "Eric, can I be your girlfriend?" Actually, I only had one boyfriend. It's not as bad as people say." "Drew, don't be like this." Eric was thinking about how to reject Drew when Penny Marshall's heavenly voice rang out. "Hey, you 2 little guys, stop being so lovey-dovey. Get ready for the next scene." Eric quickly responded. He broke free from Drew's arm and walked to the set. Drew looked at Eric's back as he left. The flirtatious look on her face quickly disappeared and turned into a faint resentment. Jennifer Aniston, just you wait. I want you to see me take away your most precious thing with your own eyes. You call me a pitiful person, but let's see who's the pitiful one in the end. Humph. Chapter 13. A week later, the school scene was completely finished, and the crew began to shoot other scenes. Wow. Susan Sarandon walked up to Eric. She reached out her hands and pinched Eric's face. You look so much like my husband, don't you? Eric snorted. That's my ex-husband. It's really strange. Eric agreed. What's going on? Susan continued. At this time, Penny Marshall, who was watching the monitor, shouted, Cut, Eric, you're laughing again. This is the fifth time. Can't you restrain yourself a little? In people's minds, it was normal for a director to have a bad temper. In the face of the actors' repeated NGs, wasting the crew's time and money, no matter how good a person's temper was, they would be so angry that they wanted to cut someone with a knife. In this situation, Eric could only apologize again and again. I'm sorry, Penny. I promise, next time, I will try not to laugh. Penny Maxier rolled her eyes. Clearly, this wasn't the first time Eric had made a promise. Everyone, bury yourselves and prepare for another round. Susan Sarandon, who was next to Eric, said, Eric, when I rub your face later, you can try to look away. Don't focus on me. Okay, Ms. Sarandon, I will try. To be honest, this scene was not very funny, but for some reason, Eric could not help but laugh. When they started shooting again, Eric followed Susan Sarandon's advice and held back his laughter. After 6 takes, this scene finally passed. During the break, Eric walked to Susan Sarandon and said, Ms. Sarandon, thank you so much for just now. It's nothing, Eric. Just call me Susan. In fact, you are talented. I have never seen an actor as good as you in his first acting. Oh, thank you. Susan, can I ask you a question? Please speak. Eric said, I want to know, Susan, how do you maintain such a good figure? Wow, Eric, can I take that as a compliment? Susan Sarandon raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile. Noticing Susan Sarandon's meaningful smile, Eric suddenly remembered that the beauty in front of him was a famous Hollywood woman who liked to eat young men. She had found several boyfriends who were more than 10 years younger than her. She even planned to marry her boyfriend who was 32 years younger than her when she was in her 60s. No, Susan is actually my girlfriend. She's on a diet recently, so I was wondering if I could get some advice from you. Oh, I see. Losing weight is not an easy task. I happen to know a good fitness consultant. She runs a women's fitness club in Beverly Hills. At the same time, she is an excellent nutritionist. You can take your girlfriend to her for some consultation. She will make a reasonable weight loss plan for your girlfriend. Then, Susan, can you leave me an address? Of course, no problem. Susan Sarandon asked her assistant for a pen and paper. She quickly wrote a note and handed it to Eric. Eric put the note away, thanked her, and turned to leave. Just as he walked to his resting place and sat down, Drew quickly pulled her chair next to Eric. She sneakily leaned over and said, Hey, Eric, what did Susan just write for you? Is it a date address? Eric pushed Drew's face away and said, Of course, you also saw it. A 13-year-old girl like you shouldn't waste your energy. Huh? Drew chuckled. She was just joking. Eric's generous admission was tantamount to denying this possibility. She then said, I heard that children who grew up without a mother have an Oedipus complex. Are you like this too? Obviously, Drew had done some research on Eric's family situation. Hey, Drew, this is not a good topic. Drew thought that Eric was angry when he heard about his mother, so she stuck out her tongue. Eric, after work today, can you treat me to dinner? Eric shook his head and said, No, if you want to treat me, you should treat Anne. That big fat girl, are you going to raise her into a Tyrannosaurus Rex? Eric was a little curious. In this era, people already used the word Tyrannosaurus to describe fat girls? Tyrannosaurus Rex? Drew, don't you think it's inappropriate to talk about my girlfriend in front of me? If you were a man, maybe I would beat you up right now. Humph, don't think I don't know. You two aren't boyfriend and girlfriend yet. I heard about her audition. Her role was given to her by James because of you. With the big fat girl's pride, she won't be your girlfriend now. At least wait until the filming is over. What a hypocritical woman. Drew, Eric said with a serious face, if you say that again, don't think I'll talk to you again. Okay. Drew raised his hands in surrender and said, then I'll treat you to dinner, okay? After dinner, we can find a place to talk about your book, Jurassic Park. It's really well written. I officially announce that I'm now a fan of Mr. Eric Williams' books. Eric said, stop fooling around, Drew. Will your mother allow you to mess around? That woman. Drew's face was full of disgust. As long as it's not time to sign a check, she won't care about me. It seemed that Drew Barrymore's prejudice against his mother was deeply ingrained in his bones. No wonder in his previous life, after Drew turned 16, he completely broke with his family. There were a lot of scenes involving Eric today. Even with his young body, he couldn't take it. After work, he walked to the parking lot, feeling a little tired. Soon, he realized that Drew was chasing after him like a shadow. Hey, Eric, you promised to treat me to dinner. Don't run away. Eric stopped and said, Drew, don't be unreasonable, okay? When did I promise you? Go back. No. Drew grabbed Eric's arm. Her originally rude and unreasonable expression quickly turned pitiful. I've already sent my assistant away. You won't be at ease with a little girl going home alone, right? What if I meet bad people? Will they drag me to a corner and rape me before killing me? Eric was already quite immune to Drew's cheat-like face-changing skill. He was unmoved and said, they won't. I'll be at ease if you go home alone. Go, I'm tired from the day. I need to go back and rest. Drew saw that her pitiful act was useless. She rolled her eyes and rubbed her blonde hair into a mess. She pulled off the straps of her singlet and scratched her body with her little claws. A few red marks quickly appeared. Then, she looked up at Eric. She blinked her big eyes, which were already filled with tears. If you don't agree, I'll sit on the ground and cry for help. I believe the LAPD will teach you a good lesson. Eric held his forehead and rubbed his throbbing temples. Great sage, hurry up and show your spirit and subdue this little demon who's stirring up trouble. Bang! Eric gloomily slammed the door and started the car. He asked Drew, who was sitting in the passenger seat, okay, you won, Drew. Tell me, where are we going? Mastro Restaurant. I want to eat steak. As you wish, Your Majesty. By the way, where is Mastro Restaurant? Drew first looked at Eric with disdain, then suddenly said excitedly, why don't I drive? Don't even think about it. I don't want trouble. Hurry up and tell me the address, or I'll just pick one. Drew pouted and said the restaurant's address. Eric drove to the destination. Chapter 14. Hurry up and eat. I'll take you home after eating. I've seen you yawn several times. You must be tired. Drew took a sip of juice and looked at Eric coquettishly. You can also take me home. You can do whatever you want. Cough. Eric choked and quickly covered his mouth with a napkin. He glared fiercely at Drew. This little girl is really unscrupulous. Gradually, Eric found that Drew's eating speed was getting slower and slower. She spoke less and less. Even the hand holding the knife and fork was slightly trembling. Just as he was about to ask Drew if she was feeling unwell, Eric suddenly thought of some people he saw in the entertainment circle in his previous life. He quickly confirmed one thing: Drew's drug addiction might be acting up. It can't be so coincidental. Eric smiled bitterly in his heart. He looked at Drew, who was trying her best to endure. He quickly shouted to the waiter, "Waiter, the bill." Eric just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Although many people knew about Drew's drug addiction and it was even reported in the newspapers, there were no pictures or facts. In most people's impression, Drew was still the cute little girl who was kissed by aliens in E.T. If someone saw Drew's drug addiction in a public place, or even took a picture, it would be a devastating blow to Drew's image. After quickly paying the bill, Eric said to Drew, who was sitting there in a daze, "Drew, let's go. I'll take you home." She held Eric's arm and walked out of the restaurant. Eric felt the petite body leaning on him, trembling slightly. He couldn't help but feel pity for her. In the car, Drew quickly curled up in the passenger seat and shivered. Then she said to Eric, who started the car, "Eric, can you help me buy some?" "No," Eric said firmly. "Drew, bear with it. I'll send you home. Can you tell me your address?" "No." Drew quickly shook his head and suddenly shouted hysterically, "I don't want to go home, I don't want to go home. That woman will only send me to rehab if she sees me like this. I won't go back, I won't go back." Eric quickly comforted her, Okay, we won't go back." After thinking about it, Eric started the car and drove to his home. After parking the car in the garage, Eric carried Drew, who had completely fallen into a state of confusion, into his bedroom. Eric, I beg you, buy some for me." Drew curled up in Eric's arms, grabbing onto Eric's collar as he cried bitterly and begged. "No, Drew, I can't do that. That would only make things worse. Vomit. No matter how beautiful a little girl was, she wouldn't look good when she vomited." The steak that she just ate was all vomited on Eric's bed, and some of it splashed on Eric's body. The room was quickly filled with an unpleasant smell. Eric frowned slightly, but when he saw the girl struggling unconsciously in the filth, he felt even more pity. He quickly pulled down the dirty sheets and cleaned them up. Eric found a towel, picked up Drew slightly, and carefully wiped the vomit on her body. Feeling the coolness on her forehead, Drew, who slightly recovered, grabbed onto Eric again. She trembled and murmured without any sense of threat, If you don't buy some for me, I'll Eric hugged the girl and said, "Drew, bear with it. Those things will only have the opposite effect. It won't help you at all. You have to be strong. You're a lucky girl who was kissed by aliens." "I don't want to be a lucky girl." Eric also didn't know how to help people with drug addiction. In his previous life, although he had met many drug addicts in that circle, he had never encountered a situation like Drew's. At this time, he realized that his body temperature might be of some help to Drew, so he hugged Drew into his arms and gently stroked her back, hoping that she would feel better. More than an hour passed like this. No matter how Drew struggled, begged, threatened, or cursed, Eric always held Drew tightly in his arms and patiently comforted her. Finally, Eric realized that Drew had unknowingly fallen asleep in his arms. Because he had been in the same position for a long time, Eric felt that his waist had become stiff. He wanted to let Drew lie down, but who would have thought that just as he let go of the girl in his arms, Drew would be like a fish out of water, waving her hands subconsciously looking for something. Eric sighed softly, changed to a more comfortable position, and hugged the girl tightly in his arms again. Drew leaned her head in front of Eric, and soon her breathing calmed down again. Holding the girl in his arms, Eric suddenly thought of his wife and son in the parallel space. His son was only 5 years old, and his wife was a small office worker. Since they got married, she became a full-time housewife. The family's finances were all supported by Eric alone. He didn't know how they were doing now that he had suddenly left, but he hoped that everything was fine. Drew dreamed that she had accepted another movie. In the movie, Drew played a fallen elf in the dark forest, wanton and confused. Then the prince appeared and saved Drew from the poisonous apple stepmother. He fought against the oppression of the Ice Queen with Drew, and for Drew, he rejected Snow White in the dwarf forest. The two of them held a grand wedding in a fragrant palace made of candy and cream cake. The prince carried Drew into the wedding room and placed Drew on a large bed covered with dozens of layers of quilts. Drew smiled and leaned on the prince's body, as happy as a flower. Then she woke up. She found herself in the warm embrace of a man, using the other party's arm as a pillow, and her hands tightly wrapped around the man's waist. After a brief moment of confusion, Drew recalled the events of last night, although it was only intermittent fragments. She looked at Eric's handsome face, his messy blonde hair, and even the manly aura emitted by Eric's light breathing made Drew's heart flutter. Everyone thought that Drew was God's favorite, becoming famous at a young age and having limitless prospects. But Drew never felt happy. Her father's indifference and disregard, her mother's harshness and greed, made Drew feel suffocated all the time, like a bird trapped in a cage longing for freedom. So Drew gradually lost herself and expressed her dissatisfaction with her mother's life in her own way. After she became addicted to alcohol and drugs, her mother didn't feel any pain. Instead, she was worried that she wouldn't be able to get a movie to make money for herself, so she coldly threw her into a drug rehabilitation center. Young girls, which one of them didn't look forward to the appearance of their prince? Yes, he must be gentle and considerate, tall and handsome, overflowing with talent, not mean nor unreasonable, endure her little temper, follow her little whims, fan her when she was hot, hug her when she was cold, take good care of her when she was sick, and patiently comfort her when she was sad. Even if she fell into hell, he would ride a dragon and snatch her back from the hands of the god of the underworld. Such a person really did appear. Although the reality was a little different, he didn't like her. Well, that wasn't important. Drew's original plan was to snatch Eric from Jennifer Aniston's hands as revenge for the words Jennifer Aniston had said to her that day. But now, she suddenly realized that she really fell in love with Eric. Perhaps feeling someone's gaze, Eric opened his eyes and saw Drew looking at him. He smiled gently and said, "Drew, you're awake. Are you hungry? I'll go make breakfast. You can go take a shower. You look terrible now." "Hey, Eric, why are you so nice to me?" Eric was stunned. He reached out and rubbed Drew's little head and said, "We're friends." Just as he sat up, Drew leaned over and kissed Eric's face. "Hey, Drew, your mouth stinks," Eric said with a smile. Drew let go of Eric's neck and said, "Eric, I love you." "But I don't love you." Eric got rid of Drew's entanglement and got up to open the curtains to let in the sunlight. Drew looked at Eric's back and pouted stubbornly. "You just need to know that I love you." "Okay, I know." Eric pinched Drew's cute face. "Hey, Eric, I found something." "You hugged me and slept for a whole night, but you didn't have any reaction. Isn't that too abnormal? I can check for you, free of charge." "You're so generous, Dr. Bellymore. But you'd better go take a shower quickly. We're going to be late." "Do you want to take a shower with me?" "No, I'll take a shower downstairs." "You're wrong, Eric. We should cherish water resources. It's shameful to waste water. Think of those refugees in Africa who died of thirst because of lack of water." "You're right. I'll start saving water tomorrow." "I'll be extravagant again today. Hey. In the summer of 1988, a little girl who was walking alone in the darkness of chaos came across a warm ray of light in her life. Without hesitation, she clung to it, like a drowning child, tightly grasping at every straw that could be touched. Chapter 15. Eric, this is amazing. In the front passenger seat, Drew was fiddling with the dress she had converted from a t-shirt with great interest as she exclaimed in surprise. Because of last night's vomiting, Drew's clothes were already dirty. The two of them were in a hurry to get to the set, so Eric had an idea. He remembered how his wife in his previous life had converted her men's t-shirt into a dress. Fortunately, it wasn't difficult. So now Drew was dressed in a sky blue t-shirt converted into a dress, with Eric's 3-finger-wide brown belt around her waist. This outfit was very novel and avant-garde in this era, so when they got out of the car at the set, many people couldn't help but look at Drew. Of course, there was also some meaning in their gazes, because Drew came with Eric. "Hey, Eric, you've fallen in love with someone else so quickly. Seeing how gentle and considerate you were too and a few days ago, I thought you would be a good man." After discussing the shooting plan for the day, Penny Marshall said this to Eric during the preparation time. But her tone didn't sound too surprised. In this industry, this kind of thing was very normal. Penny, the one I like is still Anne. As for Drew, it's just a coincidence. Penny Marshall teased, the clothes she's wearing are also a coincidence? Okay, Eric, I'm too lazy to care about you young people, but you have to be careful. Drew is only 13 years old now. You understand. Thank you for the reminder, Penny. Eric saw that Penny Marshall had already confirmed this matter, so he could only helplessly say this to end the topic. In the following month, nothing special happened. The shooting of Back to 17 was still proceeding quickly and orderly. Drew went from seducing Eric to chasing after him. When Jennifer Aniston appeared on set, she easily discovered this matter. So when the two girls appeared on set at the same time, the open and covert competition surrounding Eric became the spice of the tense shooting process for all the crew members. All the male actors were very envious of Eric. Even the young man who played the bad boy Stan found the opportunity to ask Eric for advice on how to pick up girls. Eric was also interested in talking nonsense with him, and the young man was stunned. But soon, something happened that made Eric dumbfounded. The other young people in the crew began to spread the secret of how to pick up girls he made up, and it even occasionally reached Drew's ears. The little girl clung to Eric in between shooting, half teasing and half complaining, so that's how you got me, you big bastard who plays with girls. What's worse is that you don't want to take responsibility after getting my heart. You thief, give me back my heart. Jennifer Aniston's rough diet and slimming plan was still going on, but after suffering so much, the effect was not obvious. The girl lost less than 5 pounds in a month. Eric was even more worried about this. Originally, there were some things that he wanted to wait until the shooting was over. Things were always full of accidents. Finally, during a shoot, Jennifer Aniston fainted because of hypoglycemia caused by hunger. Eric accompanied her for the whole night. The next day, Eric happened to have no scenes to shoot, so he took Jennifer Aniston to the fitness consultant that Susan Sarandon introduced. It was a high-end fitness club that mainly catered to Hollywood actresses. When the two of them entered, they bumped into Sigourney Weaver, the world-famous heroine of the Alien series, who was walking out of the club. One of the goddesses in his previous life. Under Jennifer Aniston's gaze, Eric went up to her and asked for an autograph. The fitness consultant was a Russian woman whose age could not be determined at all. Her name was very long, and she only asked Eric and Sigourney to call her Natasha. When Eric first saw Natasha, he noticed that Jennifer Aniston was deeply envious of Natasha's devilish figure. He could only gently hold Jennifer Aniston's small hand and comforted her by her ear. Don't worry, baby. One day, your figure will be better than hers. After Natasha learned a little about Jennifer Aniston, she patiently explained the dangers of Jennifer Aniston's previous diet. Then, she took her to do some tests. After spending the whole morning, she wrote a weight loss plan for Jennifer Aniston that was more than 10 pages long. When the two left, they deeply understood the meaning of the word high-end in this club. That was one word: expensive. When it came to payment, Jennifer Aniston insisted on paying the bill herself. As a result, she directly swiped her debit card into the negative. Fortunately, Jennifer Aniston would soon receive her remuneration for Back to 17. Although it was not much, it could solve her financial crisis. At the end of October, the filming of Back to 17 was finally coming to an end. At the same time, the post-production work and promotion of the movie had begun. Eric occasionally saw the gossip about Back to 17 in the newspaper. After Drew finished his scenes, to everyone's surprise, he took the initiative to ask to go to a rehab center. A girl who lost her way voluntarily turned over a new leaf. How could such an inspirational story not be used for promotion? Therefore, under the planning of Fox's publicity department, Drew's change was completely attributed to Back to 17. In the newspaper, Drew originally became addicted to drugs because he lost himself after becoming famous. During the filming of Back to 17, Drew gradually began to reflect on the true meaning of life in the warm and inspirational theme of the movie. He once again found the direction of life, so he made up his mind to turn over a new leaf. The article was written as if the reporter had seen everything with his own eyes. If he did not know the truth, Eric felt that he would have believed it. The other direction of promotion of the movie was him, the 18-year-old scriptwriter and male lead. After Eric finished writing the script of Back to 17, from the time he submitted the script to Fox's Discerning Eyes, the newspaper wrote about the ups and downs of the process. It created a living image of an indomitable and good young man who would never give up for his ideals. At the same time, through producer James Brooks and director Penny Marshall's affirmation of his acting skills, it also highlighted how talented he was as a newcomer acting for the first time. Of course, there was bound to be controversy. Some newspapers quickly questioned the screenwriting skills of an 18-year-old Eric. They even speculated that the movie Back to 17 was just a rough copy of 20th Century Fox's hastily launched work after the success of Flying Across the Future. The $20 million budget was likely to be lost. This prediction was not without basis. In 1985, Universal's sci-fi comedy, Back to the Future, achieved $200 million at the box office. After it successfully became the North American box office champion, other film companies, including Universal itself, followed the trend and produced several movies of the same genre. The result was without exception, which could be seen from the 1986 box office rankings. As for the controversy in the newspapers, as long as it was within the control of public opinion, 20th Century Fox was still happy to hear about it. One-sided praise and one-sided bad reviews of a movie would not produce a good result. On the contrary, appropriate controversy could arouse the audience's interest to the greatest extent. At the same time, Eric's novel, Jurassic Park, also gained a lot of benefits from this publicity wave. Originally, after the novel was released, Michael Klaus did a lot of promotion work as promised. The novel sold more than 20,000 copies in the first week, which was quite a good result for a newcomer. In the next few weeks, with the follow-up of the publicity and the novel's good reputation slowly fermented, the weekly sales also slowly increased. Although it did not reach an amazing level, it was in line with Eric's psychological expectations. After the publicity plan for Back to 17 was launched, Jurassic Park naturally became one of the important publicity points. This made Michael Krause ecstatic. Even if a media group only used 1/10 or less of its publicity resources, the impact was not comparable to his small publishing house with less than 10 employees. As a result, the book sales of Jurassic Park directly ushered in a round of growth. The gradual exposure of Back to 17 made people curious about Eric, a young man who almost created miracles that his peers could not create. Unfortunately, Back to 17 only exposed some stills and gossip about the crew. Although people could guess some of the content of the movie through the name of the movie, it was only speculation after all. Therefore, people naturally transferred all their curiosity to the novel, Jurassic Park. In the first week of October, the sales of the novel directly exceeded 100,000 copies, which was more than the total sales of the previous weeks. It also successfully reached the 8th place on the New York Times bestseller list. Although the ranking was not high, if people compared, they would find that Jurassic Park on the list were almost all works of those well-known authors. In the entire top 10, only Jurassic Park belonged to a newcomer. Because there were several night scenes today, Eric didn't go home until 10 o'clock in the evening. As soon as Eric drove not far from his house, he saw the courtyard door of his neighbor, Lance, and his wife being pushed open. A small figure walked out of the door, turned around, and closed the courtyard door. Then, it ran to the street lamp not far away and started to spin in circles in boredom. "Hey, little Stu, sneaking out of the house is not something a good child should do." Eric was curious why the youngest child of the neighbor, Stuart Runkle, would walk out of the yard alone so late at night, so he stopped the car and asked, "Come on, Eric, do you think arguing in front of a 7-year-old child is something parents should do?" Stuart pouted his mouth and replied. Eric was a little surprised that the little guy could argue with him so logically. He really didn't remember the little guy being so smart. Slightly tilting his head, he heard the quarrel of Runkle and his wife in Runkle's house. "So, what are you doing here?" Eric continued to ask as he retracted his attention. Stuart crossed his arms and leaned against the street lamp next to him. He looked like a little adult. I'm pretending to run away from home. Pretending? Yeah, so that when they find out that I'm missing, they won't quarrel anymore. Eric also felt that the couple quarreled in front of the child too much, so he said, "So, little guy, how about coming to my house for a while? It's dangerous for you to stay here late at night." "Well, thank you, Eric." Eric parked the car, opened the door and walked into the living room with the little guy. Chapter 16. Do you want something to eat? I have some, chocolate and apples. Eric opened the empty refrigerator and asked. Stuart Runkle sat on the sofa and shook his head. No, it's not a good habit to eat late at night. If you have milk, give me a cup. Drinking milk at night is good for sleep. Eric raised his eyebrows and poured a cup of milk for Stuart. He asked, "Who told you this?" "It's from the books." "Eric, don't treat me as a child who doesn't know anything. I'm 7 years old." Eric laughed and nodded. "Okay, big boy. So, why did your parents quarrel today?" "Dad resigned and said he wanted to open his own company. Mom quarreled with him. Alas, women are really troublesome. Before Dad resigned, Mom always nagged Dad that the company he worked for was too small and had no future. Now Dad finally made up his mind to resign. Mom immediately turned hostile and said Dad was irresponsible to give up a stable job." Eric leaned on the sofa. He didn't care much about Runkle and his wife's family affairs. He nibbled an apple and smiled. "I think you've heard too many things that are not suitable for your age." Stuart grinned as if he had heard a compliment. He rolled his eyes and jumped off the sofa. He ran to Eric and sat down beside him. He asked, "Eric, are you shooting a movie now?" Eric nodded. "Yes, it's almost finished. You can ask your mom to take you to see it." "Then, Eric, do you think I can shoot a movie?" Stu, why do you suddenly have such an idea?" Stuart said with expectation in his eyes. "I heard that movie stars get paid a lot. If I become a movie star, I can make a lot of money for my family. With money, Mom and Dad won't quarrel anymore. If Runkle and his wife were here now, would they feel ashamed to hear these words?" Eric thought about it and said, "But you're too young now. You may not know this, but children are one of the most difficult factors to control in a movie. In many movies, children's roles were reduced as much as possible. Even during filming, the director would tremble with fear because once the children started crying, the entire crew would be paralyzed. Moreover, you have the great child protection law. The contract signed by the production team has no binding effect on children at all. So, I think it's better to wait until you grow up, at least until you're 18, like me." "Hey, Eric, I'm not one of those childish brats. I'll be very obedient. I heard that you are the scriptwriter of the movie. Help me write a role. I will be very grateful." Stuart looked at Eric with sparkling eyes. Although Stuart Runkle was a little too smart for a child his age, he was still only 7 years old. He naively thought that as long as Eric wrote a role for him, he would be able to act in a movie. Eric's heart skipped a beat. He sat up straight and carefully sized up the little boy in front of him. He had just thought of someone, Macaulay Culkin. That super child star who became famous all over the world because of Home Alone. At this moment, an extremely bold idea involuntarily emerged in Eric's mind. Although it was not clear enough, Eric knew that if this plan succeeded, he could easily overcome the most difficult primitive stage of accumulation. He could directly break through the restrictions of age, money, experience, and a series of other factors and realize his dream. Although this plan was very difficult for him, who was currently poor, how would he know if he did not try? It was rare to take a gamble in life. Moreover, looking at Stuart, who had an IQ of at least 10 years old, the biggest uncertainty in the movie was gone. "Then Stu, to be honest, I do have a suitable role for you, and it's a main character." Stuart was pleasantly surprised as he lay on Eric's lap. He looked up and asked, "Eric, what is a main character?" The main character is the one who gets the most pay in the movie. I'll act, Eric said, but we have to get your parents' permission. Then, I'll send you home and talk to your parents. Holding Stuart's little hand, just as they walked out of Eric's house, they heard the voices of the neighboring Runkle couple. I'm telling you, Charleston Runkle, if anything happens to Stu, I'll divorce you. Charleston Runkle, who had always been weak in arguments, suddenly shouted, Shut up, you be *tch. If you didn't start the argument, would Stu have secretly run away? Let's go to the basement and see if Stu is hiding there. Mary Runkle was shocked by her husband's sudden shout. Plus, it was indeed her fault. For a moment, she followed her husband obediently. Just as she was about to search, Eric's voice sounded from next door. Hey, Mr. Runkle, don't worry, Stu is here. Eric picked up Stu. The couple saw their son in Eric's arms and breathed a sigh of relief. After sending Stuart back to Runkle's house and hearing Eric's general description, the couple regretted it and promised not to quarrel in front of the child again. Actually, Mr. Runkle, there is one more thing. Stu just said that he wants to act in a movie. Just in time, I have a script that is very suitable for Stu. Moreover, with Stu's intelligence, I think there is no problem to play that role. The couple was a little surprised. If they didn't know Eric's recent situation, the two were likely to directly take Eric's words as a joke. However, now even the news of Eric appeared in the newspaper, so although they were surprised, they also had some expectations. The couple's life was somewhat unsatisfactory. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a midlife crisis. If their son could act in a movie and become a star, it was self-evident what it meant. Eric, can you roughly tell us what kind of movie it is? Eric said, Of course, this is a comedy. It is roughly about a little boy who is left at home by his careless parents. After spending 5 minutes, Eric roughly explained the plot of the story and then said, I just chatted with Stu for a while and found that Stu's current IQ is higher than the little boy in the movie. So, if you agree, you can let Stu try. Several people looked at the boy sitting next to them who looked very well behaved or pretended to be well behaved. Daddy, Mommy, I think I can do it. This story is great. The child is still too young, I think. Charleston was just halfway through his words when Runkle's wife secretly pinched him. Eric, can you give us some time to think about it? No problem. Eric nodded and added fuel to the fire. But you have to give me an answer as soon as possible. This movie is scheduled to be released during Christmas. If the results are good, it is likely to be made into a series. If you agree, the protagonist will be Stu. For a series of movies, even ordinary people knew that the protagonist's salary would definitely get higher and higher. At the same time, Eric tactfully didn't tell Runkle and his wife that he would personally direct the movie. Now, everything was still unclear. Eric wasn't even sure if this plan would succeed. He didn't want to give the script of The Kid at Home to 20th Century Fox or other movie companies. He planned to completely produce it himself. For him, who only had half a foot in the industry, the difficulty could be imagined. When he got home, the excited Eric didn't feel sleepy at all. He sat in front of the typewriter and quickly typed out the script of The Kid at Home, while thinking about the specific implementation of the plan. First was the funding. In terms of the actors, other than Stuart, the two stupid thieves were also the most important. Eric didn't plan to invite Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern from his previous life. Both of them were now relatively famous movie actors. Joe Pesci was even nominated for an Oscar. With the little money he had, he couldn't even afford to pay them. Eric planned to find 2 TV actors who acted in comedies. In this era, the status of TV actors was completely incomparable to movie actors. When they greeted people, they were too embarrassed to say that they acted in TV dramas. Therefore, the pay was quite low. The filming location was definitely Canada. Los Angeles had just entered autumn, and many places in northern Canada were already snowing. There were also other messy things. The lights in the bedroom were on for the entire night. When the sunlight shone into the bedroom, Eric stood up and stretched. After calculating for an entire night, the production cost of The Kid at Home in his previous life was $18 million. From Eric's professional point of view, that was completely the cost of the filming and promotion. The cost of the filming was only around a few million, and most of it was the remuneration of the actors and director. But now, because he already had the kid at home in his mind, all Eric had to do was transfer it onto film. Therefore, he could save a lot of unnecessary waste. In terms of promotion, Eric also had other plans. But no matter how careful he was, without $1 million, the movie couldn't be filmed. $1 million. Back to 17 would be completed in a few days. Eric could get $500,000 as a remuneration. Plus the original remuneration for the script, he would have about $90,000 left. Altogether, it was less than $600,000. Yup, Jurassic Park was selling so well. If he discussed it with Michael Krause, he might be able to get $200,000. In the end, he would still be short of $200,000. In the end, Eric decided to try and prepare for it first. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.